Oh, wow.
Oh wow, what?
I didn't
What I
realize so
missed?
many people were on.
Oh yeah, we're right on time today.
I
Without
know.
even like trying too.
I know. We made it
It's
on
gonna be a
time.
good day.
It is. Today has been a good day. Let us keep the momentum going.
Hey, Kayla, Dan, Kathy, Patrick, Mike, Glenn, everyone's
Kayla,
here. What's up?
yeah. Um,
Ooh, what type of work project, Mike? Or is it hush hush? Can't disclose.
Angela's covered in paint and is lurking. Well,
Ooh,
welcome.
nice.
Painting a room or painting a painting?
I was gonna say you're probably gonna be covered in paint after the stream.
I
You
will
said you
be.
wanted to paint after the stream.
I am. I'm going to paint after the stream.
Hey, Melanie. Hey, Anna.
Dan Williams said that we all show up to socialize like a high school football game, even though the event's gonna suck.
The team's always gonna lose, but hey, your friends are there, and that's what matters.
That's right. Let me get the story up.
Get my tea. Oh man, did your high school football team suck?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Okay,
yeah.
so it
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
just mine. Yeah.
The only thing we were good at was girls soccer and basketball.
Only thing my school was good
Oh,
at was
swim team was good too. Girls swim team was really good.
we had wrestling. That was like it. Football team. When I was a freshman, our senior varsity team like went to states and like barely lost. I think they lost states by like a touchdown or a field goal or something.
Oh wow.
And it was like after that, I don't think we won a single game the entire time I was in high school. Like no one could win.
Kathy said she came to the channel 2 weeks before.
Oh
Oh
no.
no.
I'm so sorry. I know I feel so bad for those people who just found our channel
And couldn't
and then
enjoy what
they
we
just had
yeah,
to get on and everything was gone.
I know. Kayla was homeschooled,
Oh, okay.
so she didn't have to suffer through bad sports events.
It's true.
I know that one year our basketball team won state. Um, and then a couple of times our girls swim team won um state. But honestly, the best two things we had were our marching band and our jazz band. You could not touch our marching band at all.
Yeah.
Every year we went to pageant of the bands and we stomped. We won state championships. We won national championships. Our marching band was fire.
Well, pageant in the bands was in my hometown, so yeah.
I'm just saying.
I don't think we were allowed to compete actually.
Oh,
Can't
Kathy
remember.
got through all of our Game of Thrones and was waiting for the next one.
Oh.
If it makes you feel any better, Kathy, we have gone through all of the Game of Thrones books and we are waiting for the next
Yeah.
one. So,
Waiting is part of the fun of Game of Thrones.
yes, the wait is part of it. That being said, though, I am sorry.
Yeah.
Um, we're still working on potentially making things available on another platform. We just haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah. It's difficult.
But we are going to try to work around and figure out a way where we can make all of that hard work available. Just be patient with us on that one. Hello, Maddie. My girl Maddie's here to hate on Remus with me.
I was gonna say to just burn Remus to the ground.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
It's funny. Yeah, just I don't know. As much as I dislike this WordPress on our own website, I mean, yeah, but they can always just take down our website or something, you know?
Yep. So we got to figure it out.
So our own website is something we've thought about.
Yeah, it is
Definitely
something we've thought about. I'm sorry you were so ready for Harry Potter.
I mean, we are looking into possibly making an official audiobook.
Yes, we are. That is true.
That can be tricky, though.
It can be. It can be pretty hard.
But I'm pretty sure with Audible, it's just kind of like submit it, and if they like it, they put it up. So
yes. Also, I didn't get to show you that, but look.
Oh, that's a baby kangaroo.
That is a baby kangaroo.
Show the people.
All right.
Can't tease them.
Here's a baby kangaroo, everybody. Can you see it? Is he handsome? He's super cute, isn't he? Yeah. He's cute, but I don't think he's as cute
as Dingo, the other baby you used to have.
Yes. I don't think he's as cute. I might be biased. My coworker agrees with me though. My coworker says, I think Stingo was cuter when he was that little.
Maybe. Oh, well, thank you, Melanie. I don't think we would need funding for it. I think it's just
it's getting permission to use the intellectual property.
Well, or getting it on a platform where they have the permission, like Audible or any other audiobook site.
I mean, we could submit them to Audible and see what they say.
I mean, maybe they will just put it up if we, give them some money. Who knows?
I mean, maybe. We'll pay you to put this on it, to let us be on your platform.
We've just kind of been getting everything settled on the channel, and this coming week, we're hoping to start getting some more videos out of the new stuff we're going to do.
Yes.
But after that gets settled, then we're going to be pushing for that, and we'll figure more out.
As we go.
Yeah.
Should we start?
Yeah, why not? Well, what happened last time? I kind of forgot. Oh, yeah, Remus came back.
Yeah.
And, again, Sirius was a lot happier to see him than he was to see Sirius.
Pretty much, yeah. It was pretty... It was pretty... I don't know. He just... Yeah.
Right now, I mean, one thing this author has done for me is Sirius's death is going to feel that more tragic now.
Yeah, like, I'm not even... I'm just going to be sad when Sirius dies, because it's just going to be... Hi, Louise. Oh, long shift. Well, welcome to the chat.
Been there, Louise. It is not fun. Good on you for just staying awake at this point.
Yeah, for real. Oh, this is going to be a long one, guys, okay? Brace yourselves.
Like
every other
tea leaves on the side of my cup.
Oh.
I'm trying to not wash them off into my mouth.
All right, are we ready? Let's get into it. Let's do it. Here we go. Hang on. Chapter 163. The War. Late Spring, 1979. Lex said this next one is being an a-hole again. Yes, it
is. One of the best game franchises ever.
Warnings. There is a brief suggestion of alcohol dependency in this chapter, as well as a mention of cancer and the death of close family members.
I thought that was the chapter when Remus's mom dies.
Maybe he's going to hold that over Sirius's head.
Is this author going to mess up and James's parents die from cancer?
Oh, maybe.
I'd have to just forget about this fanfic if they go that far from canon.
If they die from cancer, I will be pissed. Not that I haven't been pissed before. But really, it's literally canon that they died from dragonpox. I'm already getting angry, and I don't even know that that's
Let's read. We don't even know if that's the case.
Okay.
Not get angry about what we don't know.
Okay. All right. I would say I'm sorry if I thought that it would change your mind. But I know that this time I've said too much, been too unkind. Oh boy. Okay. I try to laugh about it, cover it all up with lies. I try and laugh about it, hiding the tears in my eyes. Because boys don't cry. Boys don't cry.
All right, no worries, Kayla. Thanks for stopping in.
Yep, thanks for hopping in. They stayed in the room above the pub for 2 more nights. Marlene came back on the first evening, as good as her word, and brought a potion for Remus's chest infection. She prescribed rest, but the next day Remus was going mad from being cooped up, so he and Sirius caught the bus to the beach. It was too cold for swimming, being April, so they just walked. It was very quiet out for the tourist season, so it was okay to hold hands, too, for a little bit. Remus closed his eyes and breathed in the sea air, smiling. The sky was grey, threatening rain, but wind was fresh on his face, and he felt better. "When we get home," Sirius said brightly, "we'll go to Ollivander's to get you a new wand." "Great," Remus nodded. He hadn't done any magic since he'd been back. Didn't trust himself. "That's if Mary'll hold off on your welcome home party," Sirius chuckled. "She was going bonkers worrying. I think she must still have a thing for you." "Ha," Remus replied. "And Lily, obviously. She really wants to tell you something, but she said she had to wait until we were all in the same room."
What, James and her getting married? That's probably it. Or maybe
She's pregnant with Harry. No, still too early.
So probably married.
Probably getting married. Angela says she hopes Action J graces us with his presence.
Me too. I haven't seen him most of the day. I think he's out on... It's very hot today, so I think he's chilling out on our porch.
He might come in, though.
Sun.
He usually comes in and sits on the lap when we're reading.
Yeah.
He's just got to figure out what we're doing. Can't wait for everything to be back to normal. Back to being Marauders, eh? Yeah. Do you remember what sort of wand Lyle had? Maybe you can get the same one again. Nope. Mooney? Are you okay? Yeah. Sirius was quiet after that, and Remus felt guilty. After his brusque debriefing with Moody, Remus hadn't been in a very talkative mood. He was too anxious to say very much. He didn't know what Sirius might think of him, and on top of that, Remus was struggling more than he thought he would, being away from the pack. He was thrilled to be back with Sirius, of course, but at the same time he felt he was missing something. He didn't want Sirius to worry, so he did his best to be normal. "So nice to be outside," he commented as they walked. "Are you sure you're my Mooney?" Sirius teased, pretending to be affronted. "My Mooney hates going outside." "Well, spend a week locked up in a dungeon and tell me how you feel about fresh air," Remus muttered. Sirius stopped and looked at him, his mouth slightly open, expression hurt. Sorry, Remus said guiltily. He took Sirius's hand again. "I didn't mean that." He'd been doing that a lot since he got back. Snapping. The smallest thing might send him off, and Sirius was bearing the brunt. "It's okay," Sirius replied shakily. "I shouldn't make fun of you, after everything." "No, I don't want... You shouldn't have to treat me like I'm fragile or something. I just need to get over it. It's my own fault." Sirius didn't say anything for a long time. Remus fought the urge to probe his mind, as the werewolves had taught him to do. What? He didn't know if it worked on non-werewolves, but he did know that Sirius had extremely strong feelings about having his private thoughts invaded. "You don't have to get over it," Sirius said finally, "but it might help to talk." "About what?" "What happened in the pack." "I've talked about that already. I've told Moody everything. You were there." "Remus," Sirius raised his voice slightly. "Come on. You didn't tell him everything. I know you." "Everything important to the war effort," Remus said firmly. "So nothing else happened then?" Sirius let go of Remus's hand because his own hands were suddenly in the air, gesturing wildly.
They just locked you up, then let you go, and it was all fine. Obviously not. Remus folded his arms, suddenly feeling the chill. But no one wants to hear about things like that. Maybe I want to hear. Here we go. Remus rolled his eyes. Well then, what do you want to hear? Why did you go in the first place? Why didn't you come back to me? I knew it, Remus said, tightening his arms round his body. You're angry with me. I'm not. I'm just... That's what you meant, wasn't it? The night I got back. What are you talking about? You know, you came back. That's what you said. You thought I wasn't going to. You thought I'd left for good. Remus was shouting all of a sudden, and he wasn't sure how he'd got so angry, but now it was just burning him up. Of course I didn't, Sirius shouted back. I just didn't know what to think. Do you know what it's like for me? You just disappeared and no one would let me look for you. And fucking Ferox wouldn't tell me anything, and James was a mess with his parents getting sick, and the fucking Pruitts. Sirius didn't shout often, not as often as Remus anyway, and his voice got very high very quickly, suddenly sounding incredibly posh and haughty. This just riled Remus up even more. Oh, poor you! Jesus, I thought you got over this spoiled brat routine by now. We're not 12 anymore, Black. Sirius's mouth fell open now, utterly affronted. Remus felt more alive than he had in days, but he wasn't ever going to admit it. He just kept shouting, shattering the peace of the empty beach, voice ringing against the dark, wet sand. I'm sorry if I'm not like you. I don't want to whinge about every unpleasant thing that happens to me. Like what? Sirius yelled, cheeks red and eyes bright, so that for a moment Remus questioned whether Sirius was enjoying this just as much as he was. Go on! If I'm so selfish and terrible, please enlighten me on the true nature of noble suffering, Remus. I know that's your specialty. Oh, up yours! Well, why didn't you come back? Because they were fucking with my head. Remus practically screamed this, the waves seeming to crash louder and seagulls crying overhead in answer. He was ablaze, filled with words that came tumbling out of him as soon as he thought them. Because I never felt like that before. They were my family, and we were the same, and we were all at home, and it was like the only place in the world I was meant to be. It was all that, except... And now tears were coming, scalding hot. Except he was there, that fucking monster. He was so evil, and I was so scared, and I wanted to come home to you, I did, but I couldn't just leave them with a man like that. And they could do things I didn't know I could do. They taught me, and I just didn't know who I was anymore. He wiped his face, the tears dripping off of his chin. He looked Sirius in the eye. I don't know who I am. They stared at each other as the echoes subsided. Remus was breathing heavily, his cheeks hot, but he felt good, relieved. Finally Sirius spoke. He put his hands in his pockets, squinted around off into the distance. He smiled. Why is it always this beach, eh? What? Remus blinked, caught off guard. Sirius looked at him, eyes twinkling. Why is this the beach where we have all the big revelations? Maybe we're just dramatic. How very dare you! Sirius was smirking, and Remus laughed despite himself. Well, Sirius said, feel better? Yeah. Oh, wait a minute, did you just deliberately try to piss me off? No. Sirius looked away again, piously. Not at first. Dickhead. It worked. Remus didn't respond because he really did feel better and he didn't want to fight again. They kept walking and eventually reached roughly the spot where they had all camped out 2 years ago. The wind was kicking up, sweeping across the grassy sand dunes, and the campsite was empty. It didn't look like the same place. Think we'll ever come back here? Remus asked, hands in his pockets to stop his coat flapping in the breeze. I hope so, Sirius replied. It's my Patronus thought, this place. Is it? Remus looked at him, surprised. Haven't had any better summers yet. Fair point. Oi, look! Sirius wandered off toward a group of rocks, bent, and picked up a big long stick. He waggled it at Remus, grinning. "Want to play fetch?" Remus laughed. "Go on, then." Sirius glanced round covertly to confirm they were alone, then transformed into Padfoot. Remus was grateful. He'd done enough talking now, and it was a relief to just play with canine Sirius for a few hours. The big black dog raced up and down the beach, chased waves, played fetch, and generally had an excellent time, and on the bus back to the pub, both of them fell asleep. It wasn't until much later that night, after dinner— oh, how Remus had missed real food, mashed potato, sausages, gravy— when they were getting ready for bed, that Sirius brought it up again. Remus was yawning as he crawled under the covers, and Sirius got in beside him quietly, turning off the bedside lamp. The bed was so narrow that Remus had to lie with his back to the wall, an arm round Sirius's waist, and a face full of silky black hair, but she didn't really mind. "I know who you are," Sirius whispered into the empty quiet of the dark bedroom. Remus asked, sleepy and confused. Sirius pulled Remus's hand to his mouth and kissed his fingers. "You said you don't know who you are anymore, but I do. You're my Moony. Always will be. Okay?" "Okay, Padfoot." For now it was enough. Moody got word to them that they could return to their flat, provided that Remus keep a low profile for a while. He didn't specify for how long. This meant no order meetings and no missions. He wasn't even allowed to visit the Potter's house. For all intents and purposes, Remus Lupin had vanished off the face of the earth a month ago and never returned. "I bet he just wants to wait for the next full moon to get the all clear," Sirius suggested. "Anyway, you deserve a break." Remus just shrugged. "Served my purpose now, I suppose. They don't know what to do with me." "Don't talk about yourself like that," Sirius snapped irritably. They'd been stuck in the same tiny room for too long. They apparated back, and Remus began to feel a bit more himself once he really was home. The flat was immaculately tidy. Apparently Sirius had a lot of nervous energy while Remus was away, but otherwise everything was as it should be. No one was supposed to know that Remus was back, but of course James had told Lily and Peter, and Marlene had told Mary, so the first evening they were home, everyone came over at once. Luckily Lily had the presence of mind to bring food, because Sirius had nothing at all in the house. "Been eating at the Potter's," he mumbled bashfully. Remus and Lily went into the kitchen to set out sausage rolls, cheese and pineapple sticks, and sandwiches out on plates. Lily set down her carrier bags on the counter and flung herself at him, arms round his waist, head in his shoulder. Remus patted her gently when he realized she was crying. "Ah, Lily, please don't." "I'm sorry," she sobbed, her voice thick and muffled against his best woolly jumper. I just didn't think I'd ever see you again." "God, you're making more of a fuss than Padfoot." "Not likely," she laughed, stepping back and wiping her cheeks. "He was a complete wreck while you were gone. You wouldn't have recognized him. I don't even think he combed his hair." Remus felt a horrible stab of guilt. He didn't want to be gloomy in front of Lily, though, so he just gave her a breezy smile and said, "So, you've got something to tell me?" "Oh, when everyone's here." Lily was blushing and suddenly focused very hard on chopping up carrots for the dips she'd brought. It didn't take much longer for Marlene and Peter to arrive straight from work. Peter even had a briefcase now with his initials on it. Apparently he'd been doing all right for himself at the ministry, and Remus tried not to be too bitter about it. Marlene insisted on giving Remus another once-over in the bedroom, checking his ankle, which was as good as new, and his chest, which was much better. "Honestly, I can't believe you're still smoking," she tutted as he lit up, buttoning his shirt. "You know it kills muggles." "Die young and leave a pretty corpse," he winked at her, not trying to think about Hope's lung cancer. The fact was that smoking and drinking were the only things he felt like doing these days. Mary burst into tears as soon as she arrived and leapt into Remus's arms. "You absolute bastard," she whispered into his neck. "I could kill you." "Missed you too," Remus said, squeezing her back. Once they were all together, Sirius and James took over as host, which was a relief. Remus just felt suddenly very tired and sat on the couch like a ghost, watching his friends chatter and laugh and act like 19-year-olds for once. He just smiled at them all. Smiled and drank. Eventually, the food was nothing but crumbs and the booze was running low too. James, Sirius, and Peter had the idea to summon beers from neighbouring flats via the window, and the girls were trying to convince them not to, when Remus remembered what Lily had said in the kitchen. "What's your news?" "Oh!" Lily's head turned sharply toward him. She was standing by the window, arms round James's shoulders, trying to pull him away from his thieving attempts. James turned too, and they shared a sheepish look. "Everyone?" James cleared his throat. Lily and I have something to—" "Oh, Christ!" Mary said suddenly from where she was lounging in the armchair opposite Remus, legs flung over the arm. "Lily, I thought you were on the pill." "Mary!" Lily turned an even darker shade of red. "Not that!" "Phew!" Mary laughed, closing her eyes. "Because we're not even 20 yet. We're much too young to be thinking about—" "We're getting married!" Lily yelped quickly before Mary could make any further comment. You could have heard a quill drop. Remus blinked a few times, watching James's face to check that it wasn't all a big joke, but he was beaming down at Lily with so much love and pride in those soppy brown eyes of his that Remus simply smiled to himself. Of course, he thought. Of course. Remus's second thought was Sirius, who'd been half leaning out of the window when the announcement broke. Now he spun round so fast he smacked his head on the frame. "You what?" He stared at James, a mix of surprise and displeasure on his face. "Yep," James grinned, oblivious, wrapping his arms round Lily. "She asked, and who was I to refuse?" "You asked," Marlene poked Lily. "Bloody feminist hero, Evans." "It was a bit more mutual than that," Lily laughed. "We were just talking and—" "But we only just left school," Sirius said, his voice low, his voice dull. "A year ago," Peter reminded him, straightening the lapels of his green-checked blazer. "You don't even live together." Sirius folded his arms. Remus felt trapped. These were all warning signs that Black was getting ready for a fight, except for once it was not Remus he was fighting with. "I'm going to move in with James's family for a bit," Lily said, her smile faltering as she realised that Sirius was not sharing their joy. "Yeah, you know how much they love having her around," James said. His voice had hardened and he kept his arms round Lily as if protecting her. "She's been amazing while they've not been well." "Have you really thought this through?" "I'm sure they have, Black. Chill out," Mary said, trying to lighten the mood. She got up. "Shall I pop out and see if we can get some cheap fizz? This deserves a toast." "Yeah." Marlene stood up too. She hugged Lily, then kissed James on the cheek. "Congratulations, you two." "Congratulations!" Peter raised his beer can drunkenly. "Have you all gone mental?" Sirius shouted. Remus caught the look of dismay on Lily's face and decided that was enough. He stood up. "Padfoot," he said firmly, using that voice. "No." Sirius glared at him now. His mouth shut abruptly and he tossed his head like a moody teenage girl before pushing past them all and marching out of the room. The bedroom door slammed. "Silly sod," Mary said breezily. "I'll nip out to the shop. Come in, Miles?" "I'd better—" Remus jerked his head in the direction of the bedroom and followed after Sirius. He didn't knock, just walked right in. After all, it was his flat too. Sirius was ready for him and started as soon as Remus closed the door behind him. "You can't possibly tell me you think this is a good idea," he ranted, pacing the room. "Prongs is being ridiculous. We're too young, there's a bloody war on, his mum and dad are ill, and he wants to have a fucking wedding." "I think those all sound like good enough reasons to have a fucking wedding, actually," Remus sighed, sitting down on his bed. "You're joking. We're kids." "They're in love," Remus tried reasoning. Sirius laughed, a mean, cruel laugh. "Oh, and you're going to start waxing lyrical about love, are you, Mooney?" "Watch it." Remus stood up sharply, using his height to tower over Sirius. "I don't know why you're being such a tosser to James and Lily, but I'm not going to sit here and have you fling bitchy little comments at me." Sirius was about to retort when the door swung open again, and this time James barreled in, angrier than Remus had ever seen him. You dick, he yelled. What the fuck are you playing at? Mooney, don't defend him. I'm not, Remus said, stepping away and crossing his arms. I was saying the same. Well, James rounded on Sirius. Want to explain yourself? No, I want you to explain yourself, Sirius snapped. What the fuck? You're getting married just like that? I know you've had this mad thing for Evans ever since you were 12, but bloody hell, what's the rush? It's not a mad thing, James shouted. I love her. I've been in love with her forever. You know that. So you want to get married all of a sudden? I want to get married. So you have to get married all of a sudden? I want to get married, and it's not sudden. We've been talking about it for ages. First I've heard of it. Yeah, well, I don't have to tell you everything. I didn't want to say anything until Mooney was back. What about your parents? What do they think? Sirius was losing steam, but obviously not willing to stop being angry yet. They're thrilled, actually. They love Lily, and I thought you did too. You're my best friend. I thought you'd be supportive. Oh, Sirius's eyes gleamed. Because you've always been so supportive of my relationships. James's eyes flickered toward Remus, then back again. Oh my god.
Actually, yeah, James has been very supportive of all Sirius's relationships.
It was only for a split second, but Remus definitely felt it. What the hell was that about? You know that's not, James said fiercely, jaw clenched. Remus took that as his cue to leave. Whatever was going on between the two of them, he didn't want any part in it. He went straight to the kitchen and looked under the sink. There was a bottle of fire whiskey he'd put there after the last party for safekeeping. He uncorked it and took a long swig. Remus? He almost choked as Lily entered the kitchen. She laughed and reached out a hand. Give us some, then. Mum always said never to drink alone. He laughed, wiping his mouth with the back of his sleeve, and handed her the bottle. She drank deeply and didn't wince. Remus watched her with awe and thought that if you had to marry a girl, then she better be exactly like Lily Evans. Sorry I ruined your homecoming party, she said, forlorn. You didn't, Remus shook his head. Sorry about Sirius. Oh, don't be silly. You're not his keeper. He's being a prat. He's just jealous. I knew he would be. She laughed, catching Remus's eye. No, not like that, Mooney. It's obvious he's madly in love with you. I mean, he's worried he's going to lose his best friend. You're probably right. I'm usually right. She raised an eyebrow at him and he laughed again. Congratulations, he said, sincerely this time. I think it's brilliant. Thanks, love, she smiled softly. It is a bit rushed, I know. My parents went spare. Pet was only married last year, and she's 3 years older than me, but you know Euphemia and Monty aren't well. Yeah, I wish I could go to see them, but Moody's orders, you know. They understand. She touched his arm gently. Anyway, they're not suffering or anything, but they're very old. I knew how much it meant to James, having them see him with me. They want to know he'll be okay when they're gone. Maybe he had too much to drink, but tears pricked in Remus's eyes unexpectedly. He covered his face and groaned. Jesus Christ, Evans, can't I have 5 minutes without an emotional breakdown? She laughed and hugged him again. Lovely boy. We're back, Mary and Marlene sang as they stumbled into the flat once more, giggling merrily. Hide that quick. Lily gave Remus his bottle back, and he stowed it under the sink behind a box of laundry powder. By the time Mary had poured everyone a glass, or a mug, or a baby sham, the closest thing to champagne you get in Soho after midnight, James and Sirius had re-emerged from the bedroom, both still red-faced, but apparently on better terms. Sirius joined in the toast at least, and even gave Lily a polite kiss on the cheek. Still, the atmosphere had changed, and everyone left within the next hour or so. Marlene was staying over at Mary's in Croydon. Peter went back with James and Lily. When the door closed for the first time at 1 a.m, Remus felt like curling up on the couch, covering his head and staying there for a week. Sirius didn't say much, just did a bit of perfunctory tidying up, then went to the bathroom. Remus heard the lock click shut and took the opportunity for one last glass of whiskey and a cigarette before bed. He felt grimy. His teeth were furry, his throat scorched, and his eyes itching, but it suited his mood. He didn't feel like talking anymore, especially if it led to another fight. He even considered just falling asleep on the couch, but then that might just mean another fight in the morning, and he already knew he was going to be hung over then. One thing for it. Only one thing for it. Sirius unclicked the door and Remus heard him padding through to the bedroom. Maybe if Remus took his time brushing his teeth, Sirius would doze off before he got there. They both had a lot to drink. He hoisted himself off the couch and headed for the bathroom. Remus washed his face and the back of his neck in cold water and stared at himself in the medicine cabinet mirror above the sink. He'd been avoiding his reflection since he got back. He looked like shit. Still too hollow in the cheeks, eyes darker and wider somehow. He was pale too, from too much drink, and his scars stood out like silver wires under his skin. Did he have that same haunted look that they had? The pack? Had he caught that feral glint, that rangy wolfish smirk, or was he just seeing the angry, frightened care home kid that had always been there? He sighed, defeated, and flicked off the light, going to bed at last. The lights were still on, and Sirius was under the covers, only his silky black hair visible, draped over the pillow. He always slept like that, hidden. With a flash of clarity, Remus was reminded of the child Sirius had once been, alone in a big house full of family who couldn't understand him, the weight of expectations pressing in on all sides. Remus turned his loneliness inward, always had, but Sirius, he pushed his loneliness out and let other people take it from him. So he got a bit possessive sometimes, a bit panicky. So what? Nobody was perfect. Softening, Remus got in beside him and very gently stroked Sirius's hair. "All right," he whispered. Sirius's head bobbed in a short nod under the duvet, and he reached out to wind his arms round Remus's waist. Remus sighed, relieved. It felt so good to be back in his own bed. They could always just not fight, he thought to himself. "Love you," he murmured, kissing the top of Sirius's head. Sirius's arms grew tighter round him, and soon enough they were both asleep.
Calling BS. Sirius would not have been against that. In fact, if anything, with Sirius and his rash attitude, probably would have been like, "Why are you guys going to wait so long? I can apparate us to Las Vegas right now. Let's go."
Right?
I don't know.
Their
I don't
relationship
picture
is exhausting.
I don't see Sirius being anything but supportive of James and Lily. I get the whole cliche of, he's going to be losing his best friend, but
yeah, I don't.
He's barely spent any time with James in the past 50 chapters.
Well, we don't know. I mean, they're going out on patrols and missions together and stuff.
I guess so.
I mean, Sirius is the best man at the wedding.
Yeah.
I don't know. This chapter was exhausting. Ugh.
I did see there was comments up here. Dan said that he had the chance to actually be in Star Wars.
What?
So that was a while back here. Oh, yeah, right here. Because they were saying that you should do voice acting for Hollywood.
Oh. I guess I could. I'd have to, make a tape and try it out.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to, make a test tape.
Yes, there are LGBT characters in this.
Yes.
Remus and Sirius
are together in this story. Test tapes, yeah. The story would have been better if the author wrote more about James and Lily and a lot less about Remus. Your channel is your test tape.
That's true.
I think the author tried to downplay the relationship between James and Sirius to highlight the romance between Sirius and Remus. It's exactly
Yeah.
what they're doing, but like Remus just had this stupid fight with Sirius, which was just stupid.
Yeah.
And then
No reason for it.
no reason for it. And then, well, I guess it gives Remus an excuse to like tell
You gonna get it?
Sirius what happened, but not really tell Sirius what happened.
Yeah.
And then, like this whole stupid thing with the fact that the thing that got me, I think, was when Sirius was going off, and then Remus said, "Padfoot, no."
Yeah, I know. Like, they're really playing up the whole dog thing. And then he turns into a dog and plays fetch on the beach.
yeah, like
That's how they spend their afternoon.
that's weird to me.
Kind of like off topic a little bit. I really understand why Tonks looks so miserable every time we saw her in the books.
Mm-hmm.
Having to deal with this.
Ugh. I'm glad Sirius called him out on being the damned liar that he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I'm also glad that Sirius just didn't lie down and take it this time. He pushed back a little bit when he yelled at him.
Mm-hmm.
But oh my god. I hate that he just calls him a spoiled little brat all the time.
I know.
Like, ugh. I mean, I get that Sirius is privileged and, like, grew up being arrogant and cocky with all of his privilege, but...
But where is that arrogance and cockiness? Like, Sirius has lost all that.
Right, he doesn't act like that anymore. And
Which he should.
Remus is still, like, shoving it in his face. And I feel like at this point, Sirius should still be, like, cocky, all guns blazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he owns and controls Sirius. Padfoot, no. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Not you, BD.
You said no to him.
I know. No, BD, not you.
What'd I do?
No, BD, not you.
You just wanted to come listen.
No.
It's okay.
Not BD. Case in point, right there. I love you, BD. I love you, BD. I'm not yelling at you. No lick the face.
Yeah, give him kisses. Make up.
Don't lick me on the lips, BD. Oh. I saw it. There, kisses.
Should we have called you Padfoot?
There, now he's smiling. He is a little bit.
That's right. Best doggo.
I don't even know. I hated this chapter. He's still just so mean to Sirius all the time.
Yeah, his face.
Yeah, I know.
He does get the saddest face when we have to tell him no anytime.
Or if we tell him he was naughty.
He has the puppy dog face down.
Right? Padfoot, what did you do? What did you do? Did you do that? That was naughty. Not you.
It's okay.
See?
It's okay. I'll protect you from telling you no.
That stuff just really...
Yes, you're a good boy.
That stuff just really
You're a good
bothered
boy.
me. That really made me yucky.
You can, like, lay down, maybe. He's got, like, this uncomfortable stance.
I know. He just wants to sit. Alright, should we just go on to the next one? I just don't have anything to say about this other than, Like, I'm not even excited that Lily and James announced their marriage because the shit with Remus annoyed me so much.
I mean, I'm kind of excited. And now, hey, based on this, I guess Harry's honeymoon baby.
I guess so. What was going on in the author's life to create such a chaotic relationship for so long?
That's true. I got questions for this author.
Right? Alright.
Miss Queen Bean, can we get you on for an interview?
What were you dealing with when you
Just
wrote
get her-
this?
just
Because
quick
holy
thing.
shit.
Yeah, hello. Who hurt you?
Right?
What happened? You need to talk.
Alright, are we ready? For the next one?
What's the next one called?
The War, Summer 1979.
No. Probably gonna be the wedding, and Sirius and Remus are gonna get drunk and have a fight and like crash the wedding and
Oh my god. Let's see what happens. Chapter 164. The War, Summer 1979. Content warning. Gory war stuff as well as black family trauma.
actually I'm excited. This is a good change of pace.
Yes.
Let's get some action in.
All right. Kathy says she loves seeing our fur babies. Look at how he's sitting. His leg.
That's
What
what
are
I
you
mean.
doing?
Like he can lay. He usually lays down, but he's choosing to like sit in the most awkward position.
And he looks like he wants to close his eyes, like he wants to sleep. What did he do?
That's why he usually like curls up and lays his head on my shoulder or something.
What?
He wants to know if he's allowed. Are you gonna say no again?
You a good boy. You a good boy. You good boy. Okay? You good boy. Okay. Ride the blue wind high and free. She'll lead you down through misery. Leave you low, come time to go. Alone and low as low can be. Lily and James's wedding was set for late September. It was going to be a relatively small affair, order members and school friends mostly, and it would be held at the Potters' estate. They were hoping the weather would be nice enough to have it in the gardens, but even if it rained, there was still plenty of room indoors. After making such a fuss on the night of Remus's homecoming, Sirius was clearly very embarrassed by how he acted, and made up for it by doing pretty much anything Lily and James asked of him. He ordered dress robes for the boys in Madame Malkin's, went to pick up the rings from the jeweller, and offered his entire record collection up for use at the reception. Remus, who'd never been to a wedding, tried to stay well back. As far as he knew, his duty as groomsman was to show up, keep Sirius's head from exploding, and make sure none of Lily's muggle family saw anything too scarring. Sirius's most bonkers act of contrition was to handwrite all of the invitations. His talent for calligraphy was still one of Sirius's darkest secrets, and Remus's favourite thing to tease him about, but he was determined to be the perfect best man, so he sat hunched over the dining table one afternoon and worked at it for a solid 4 hours. 58, Sirius said triumphantly, finishing the last invitation with a flourish of his quill. Well done. Remus glanced over the top of his newspaper. Ah, look at your pretty handwriting. So dainty. Better than your chicken scratch. Sirius poked his tongue out. Just don't tell anyone you did them, Remus advised, or you'll start getting requests. Do you really think they're that good? Sirius replied, holding one up to the light to inspect the delicate walls of black ink. They're gorgeous, really, Remus said fondly. Well, this is the only time I'm doing it, Sirius sniffed, tidying up the pile. This is the one and only wedding I will ever support. What if Mary got married? Or Pete? I'd show up and get drunk, but secretly I would hate every minute. You're not jumping up on me. Here, you can come up here, but I'm going to pick you up and we're going to do it. Okay, now you're going to... Okay. Just... What are you doing? Okay. We're just going to stand like this? Is that what's happening? Okay. There. Okay. Very reasonable, Remus nodded. Another thing you can blame the noble and most ancient house of Cack for, Sirius said. Do you know how many engagement dinners and weddings I've been to? Ugh. He shuddered visibly. I'm so sorry, Moony, but you'll never make an honest man out of me. Oh, and I was just about to propose, Remus said dryly, getting up. Tea? Please, Sirius nodded, rubbing his sore ankles. Remus entered the kitchen, tapping the kettle with his wand. They'd gone to get it the same day as the dress robes. It had reminded Remus a bit of going to get his school shoes as a boy. Ollivander measured him and then hummed and hawed and muttered to himself under his breath. He'd rummaged about in the stockroom and brought out box after box of wands for Remus to try. Eventually they'd settled on a flexible cypress number with a unicorn hair core. He'd been trying to get used to it. It wasn't the same as Lyle's wand, which he found out had been blackthorn with a kelpie hair core. Where did Lyle get that wand? Because Ollivander doesn't use kelpie hair in his wands.
Oh, he doesn't?
You got 3 choices. Phoenix, dragon, unicorn.
Well, that's what we heard of. I didn't think that was, like, the only 3.
Well, he talks about it in 4.
That he doesn't work with any other materials?
Yeah, he says, because he talks about Fleur's core and how he wouldn't choose to use that. He trusts what he uses, and it's the things he uses make the best ones. It's pretty much those things.
Yeah, doesn't mean that, in his early days he didn't experiment and maybe make a few.
I don't think so. Unless Lyle got his wand someplace else. I think there's only the 3.
Maybe Lyle went to Durmstrang.
Maybe. With a kelpie hair core, it seemed less rigid, more inclined to do what Remus told it, which meant that Remus had to remember not to put too much force behind his magic, as he'd grown used to doing. He watched the steam rising from the kettle spout thoughtfully. It would really piss them off, though, Remus called through the thin walls. What? Who? Your family, Remus said, plonking 2 tea bags in 2 mugs. If you married a bloke, a half-blood werewolf bloke. Don't forget poor, Sirius laughed. Merlin, just imagine sending my mother an invitation to that. Imagine sending anyone an invitation to that, Remus snorted. Christ, I can already hear James making horrible puns about the honeymoon. He carried the mugs of tea back to the living room, setting them down on the coffee table. I've already been engaged once. I really don't fancy doing it again, Sirius said with an air of finality. Oh, you're welcome for that, by the way, Remus winked. Well, if I had a nickel, I'd find a game. If I won $1, I'd make it rain. If it rained an ocean, I'd drink it dry and lay me down dissatisfied. If it's legs to walk and thoughts to fly, eyes to laugh and lips to cry, a restless tongue to classify, all born to grow and grown to die. The wedding planning was actually a very warm welcome distraction as the summer opened up before them. Sirius, James, Peter, and Lily were often called out urgently for order missions, and the list of missing read out at the beginning of every meeting was growing longer. Benji Fenwick, who'd been working with Moody for years, was horribly murdered. They couldn't even have a casket at his funeral. There wasn't enough of him left. Darius Barebones, who Remus had never liked, but who was nonetheless a dedicated agent, was found flayed alive in his own office at the ministry. They were miserable times. It was the Boltons. Remus was finally allowed to return to the Order officially after 2 full moons had passed without incident. Ferox believed that the split Castor had instigated meant that Greyback's pack was too weak to be too much use to Voldemort, and somehow everyone had got the idea that Remus was responsible for this. Dumbledore actually shook his hand, saying, You've done us all so proud, Mr. Lupin. Danny McKinnon had even apologized to him. Remus thought that was probably Marlene's doing. By July, the Order's numbers had dwindled so much that even Remus was getting sent out, and he was often paired with Mary, which made things bearable. Their general orders were to back up Aurors by standing guard or managing surveillance on some of the better-known Death Eaters. Remus and Mary spent a lot of time sitting in cafes together or hiding behind bushes. One such mission involved following a Death Eater called Travers, who was known to drink at a wizard's pub near Stoke Mandeville. They were supposed to see where he went, how he spent an average day. Caradoc Dearborn, a hero of the Order of the Phoenix, had last been seen entering the pub, but no one had heard of him since. No one had heard from him since. "You came back?" Mary whispered as they waited in the back street of an ancient Ford Cortina parked across the road. "So maybe Caradoc will too." "I hope so," Remus replied. "I just can't bear not knowing." Mary's leg was shaking nervously. "I keep imagining. And what they did to the Pruitts." "Don't think about it." He put a hand on her knee to keep her still and searched for a distraction. "Hey, did Lily decide on flowers in the end?" "Anything except lilies or petunias," Mary said with a grateful smile. "Me and Miles are wearing lavender, so whatever goes with that." "Sounds nice," Remus nodded, though he couldn't for the life of him picture the colour lavender. Was it purple or blue? "I'm so glad you're here with me, Remus," Mary said. "I could only ever get my defensive spells right in your study groups." "We're just here to watch. Everything'll be all right." They waited for hours, and when Travers finally came out, staggering and reeking of spirits, he was not alone. Remus had to nudge Mary, who dozed off, lolling against his shoulder. "Oh, shit!" she whispered, her voice hoarse with terror. "6 of them, Remus!" Remus held a finger to his lips, signalling her to be quiet. He watched the Death Eaters spill out of the pub onto the quiet country road. He recognized a few of them from pictures Moody had shown the Order. Karkaroff, Dolohov, and Electo Caro. 2 of them he recognized by scent. "Fuck," he said under his breath. "It's Mulciber and Snape." "No!" Mary grabbed his arm, peering out to look. "Oh my God, we've got to get out of here." The problem was the car was just for show, and anyway, neither of them could drive. "Stay calm," Remus said. "We'll just wait for them to go. I bet they're going to "Oh, muggles!" Electo Caro, a stocky, horse-faced young woman, pointed gleefully at the Cortina. "Let's play." "Fuck," Remus said again. The 6 dark-robed wizards glided toward them, drawing their wands. Remus pulled his out too, Mary following suit. "Quick," he said. "Let's get out. Maybe we can—" "Aperio!" Travers whipped his wand at the car, and the doors ripped away, wrenched from their hinges with a horrible crunching metal sound. Mary screamed, but she kept her wand up. Remus pushed her backwards, shielding her with his body, and hoped they could get back out the other side. He felt much better with a car between them and the 6 dangerous killers. "They're not muggles," one of the Death Eaters said gleefully. Was it Mulciber? "They're mudbloods." "Ah, even better," Electo cackled. "Impedimenta!" Remus yelled as he and Mary got free of the car. "Loony Lupin, is that you?" Snape now. "What luck! Sectum Langlock!" Mary cried with so much emotion that Remus heard the click as Snape's teeth snapped shut, and he clutched his jaw to both hands, unable to speak. "Crucio!" Mulciber shouted, aiming at Mary, but Remus jumped in quickly with a shield charm. "Stupefy!" Mary got Mulciber, but the others were still advancing, even Snape, though he was still disabled. "Quick, Mary!" Remus grabbed her hand and they disapparated, landing just about on their feet in the middle of Cardiff town square. Luckily it was so late that there were no muggles about, except for a very drunk-looking tramp who rubbed his eyes at the sight of them. "Where are we?" Mary asked shakily, her eyes huge. "Doesn't matter," Remus panted. "We need to do it again. 6 times to be safe, remember?" Yeah, okay." She nodded, clearly in shock. Remus realized he'd have to do it again. He squeezed her hand once more, and they were in Essex, only a mile or so from St. Edmunds. The landing was even harder this time, and Remus had to bend forward to stop his head spinning. "Again," he grunted. "I'll do it." Mary took his hand and dragged him whirling through space once more. Next they arrived in an industrial estate somewhere. Trucks and lorries parked outside big warehouses, glowing under faint yellow street lamps. "Ugh." Mary pressed a hand to her forehead, wincing. "Okay, again." The 4th time they had to cling to each other to stop from falling over. The 5th time they landed on their backs, thankfully in a grassy field somewhere in the Lake District. Remus hauled himself up, his legs practically jelly, his head spinning. He pulled Mary up too, and she stumbled against him, woozy. "I'm going to be sick," she said, then promptly turned round and threw up. Remus rubbed her back gently, blinking the sweat out of his eyes. "You're doing well," he choked. "Just once more." It was almost dawn when they got back to London, exhausted and queasy, heads throbbing. Mary stayed at their flat, saying she couldn't go to her mum's looking so rough. Sirius summoned Moody through the fireplace, and he arrived immediately, interrogating Remus and Mary, who sat shaking on the couch, wrapped in blankets and sipping weak tea. "Excellent work, you two," he nodded to them before leaving. "Keep it up and you'll both make it through." Mary burst into tears. It was bad all round. Remus and Mary's narrow escape that night was not their last, nor were they the only ones to find themselves in a tight spot. Remus frequently had to leave the room while James and Sirius recounted their misadventures, and Peter had developed a bit of a stammer when anyone mentioned Death Eaters. All told, the wedding felt like the only bright spot in their rapidly shortening futures. They certainly had their fill of funerals. So, in late August, when Remus and Sirius had an unexpected visit from Lily, who was in a state of panic, they immediately assumed the worst. "Oh, thank God you're here," she said, bursting into their living room. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, and she looked overtired and overworked. "What's the matter?" Remus stood up quickly. "Not you." She brushed him aside dismissively, then turned to Sirius. "I need you." "What's up?" Sirius looked just as puzzled as Remus. Lily never needed his help. "Is it prongs?" "Yes, the bastard." The worry left Sirius's face, and he smirked. "Look, if this is about the stag do..." "Oh, I don't care what you get up to," she said impatiently. "This is much more important." "I'll put the kettle on then," Remus said, disappearing into the kitchen. He could still hear them through the wall. "So what is it then?" Sirius was asking. I can't dance." "What?" he scoffed. "I've seen you dance." "Yeah, I can shake my hips to pop music, but I'm talking about proper dancing, with steps and James leading and counting 1, 2, 3, the whole thing." Sirius was laughing now.
"It's going to be that sort of wedding? Prongs practically promised there would be modern music."
"There will be," Lily returned defensively. "But, well, it's traditional to have a first dance, and I think his mum would like to see it. I agreed to do it ages ago. I thought, fine, we'll just stick on something soppy and just sort of cling to each other for a few minutes. But that wanker just actually mentioned the fact that he's been ballroom dancing since he could walk."
Sirius snorted. "Yep, that sounds about right. Look, Evans, you're the one who's bonkers enough to marry a pureblood. You've made your bed now."
"But you have to help me."
"Oh, no."
Remus re-entered the room with a tray balancing 3 cups of tea.
"Go on," he said slyly. "I'd love to see this." "Absolutely not." Sirius folded his arms decisively. "Get Pete to do it. He's a pureblood too."
"He's too short." Lily shook her head. "And, well, I don't mean to be mean, but he's very clumsy, and I don't want him stepping on my feet while I'm breaking my wedding shoes. They're white satin. Please, Sirius. I'm a fast learner, I swear. You just need to get me through one dance."
"Mooney," Sirius pleaded as Remus sat beside him. "Save me." "I think you should do it," Remus replied, sipping his tea. "For James."
"Yes,"
Lily nodded enthusiastically.
"For James."
"He doesn't deserve me," Sirius grumbled. "Fine, 1 lesson. A waltz is easy enough. Mooney, go away." "Absolutely not." Remus sat on the couch, settling in for the show. "I've never seen you do the waltz before, and I'm not going to miss it." Sirius held up his middle finger, then tossed his head and turned to Lily. "Right," he said haughtily. "Give me your hands." As amusing as it first seemed, 15 minutes into the lesson, Remus was completely entranced. Sirius worked hard to hide his pure-bloodedness most of the time. Ever since they were kids, Remus had been aware of Sirius mimicking his accent and sometimes even his mannerisms in an effort to seem less privileged. He slouched, he swore, he wore ripped jeans and leather jackets.
But here was proof that Sirius Orion Black, heir to the most prestigious and ruthless magical house in Britain, had not completely forgotten his roots. At the time, Remus found it charming, as he found almost everything about Sirius charming. He held his head high, showing off his long white neck and regal jawline. He took Lily in his arms like a real gentleman, like a courtly prince. When he moved, he glided, not a step out of place. He was the picture of incorruptible nobility. It drove Remus mad. "Thank you very much," Lily gushed, rather pink-cheeked after 2 hours of dancing. "I have to get back or he'll wonder where I am. But I seriously owe you one, Black." "Oh, just your firstborn'll do." Sirius waved a hand, gallantly grinning. He looked like he'd enjoyed himself too. Lily grabbed her bag, kissed them both on the cheek, and left via the fireplace. Sirius turned to Remus, who was still watching them from the couch. He pulled a face. "Go on, then. Take the piss." "Never," Remus smirked, getting up and walking over to him. "I love how fancy you are." He slung his arms over Sirius's shoulders and leaned in for a kiss. It went on a long time, Sirius pressing against him, affectionately at first, but then with more eagerness as the kiss deepened. Since Remus had returned from the pack, things had been a bit dry in that department. Not that they'd been monks exactly, but on the rare instances of them neither of them was exhausted, sex had become pretty functional. Sirius grinned against Remus's lips, tilting his head back. Remus's hands were on Sirius's waist, and his thumbs found their way under the waistband of his jeans, stroking circles on his hip bones that made Sirius squirm. Remus grinned too, pulling back. "Want to dance?" "So tell me, baby, I said so long. Tell my mother I did no wrong. Tell my brother to watch his own. And tell my friends to mourn me none." 3 days after the dancing lesson, Sirius and Remus found themselves with a miraculously free Saturday. There were no missions, there were no meetings, there were no wedding catastrophes to solve, and as far as Remus knew, neither of them were in mortal peril, so they spent it in the best way they could think of: sleeping. They had the longest lie-in since Hogwarts had finished, and it must have been almost 12 by the time Sirius got up to check to let the post owl in. It had been angrily pecking at their bedroom window for 15 minutes. The owl hooted indignantly, circled the room, then dropped the Daily Prophet on Remus's legs, while Sirius rifled around in the bedside table for a nut to give it. Remus rolled over, groaning. He considered covering his head with the duvet and just going back to sleep. "Shall I do breakfast?" Sirius said, picking up the paper. "Breakfast in bed?" "Have I told you how much I love you?" Remus smiled, eyes squinting open. He stretched a bit, yawning. "I think we've run out of eggs, though, so—" "Remus!" Sirius grabbed his arm so hard he'd have bruises the next day. He shoved the paper in his face, and Remus, startled, half awake, blinked at the headline. "Black Heir confirmed dead." "Huh?" Remus scratched his head, confused. "That's mental, you're not—" Then it hit him. Oh, he felt so stupid. He looked up at Sirius, who was white as a sheet, eyes wide and pained. "Oh," Remus said helplessly, reaching out. "Oh, no. Sirius." I'm chained upon the face of time, feeling full of foolish rhyme. There ain't no dark till something shines. I'm bound to leave the dark behind.
Regulus has stolen the Horcrux.
Regulus has stolen the Horcrux. Creature has been irreparably traumatized.
Mm-hmm. That was funny, though. Sirius. "Oh, your firstborn will do." That was more of a moody voice, but you get the picture.
Yeah, your firstborn. Just give me your firstborn.
And that's how he became your godparent, Harry.
By
taught your mom how to dance.
Right? Kathy, I totally get that you're not into the content. The story was a lot better when we first started it. We're just kind of trying to get through it.
We pretty much finished like 90% of the story. We can't just give up.
We can't give up yet. We do have to finish the story. Yep. His brother was a hero. And it is so sad that Sirius died, never knowing what
Yeah.
Regulus did. We're in too deep, Kathy.
Can't go back now.
Can't go back. We have to finish. This was an okay
Yeah.
chapter. I don't know. I don't have anything to say about it.
I think any chapter with James and Lily, it's always like a feel-good chapter.
I'm just gonna
comedic value to it, and it's just great.
just want to stand up for 5 minutes before we read the next one. Oh, over here.
That's fair.
Yeah, this was just okay. I don't know.
I mean, setting up for the wedding. These chapters feel really long, though. Is it just me, or do these chapters seem like they're so much longer than they used to be?
Yeah, super, super long. The first one was really long.
Yeah. I feel like a lot happened in this, but not a lot happened.
I think it was just a setup.
Do you know how to ballroom dance?
No.
I've had to do it once.
I mean, I've learned how to waltz. Like, I know how to waltz.
Oh, okay.
I kind of wanted to take ballroom dancing classes at one point just to know how to do it, because it looks like it could be fun, but... my coworker Sarah knows how to do it.
Oh, okay.
She knows how to do, like, lots of different ones, because she used to take classes all the time.
Oh, okay.
She's got, like, the shoes and dresses and stuff. And then, actually, when I lived in Russia, my best friend was a competitive ballroom dancer.
Wait, there's competitive ballroom dancing?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's like international championships, and there's judging and stuff. I watched one of her competitions one time. That shit's intense.
Do they all go out at one? Like, is it, are people tripping each other? And
No, it's like one couple competes at a time, and, you have, like, your dance partner, and you go out and you compete, and the judges watch you, and they like, judge you on how precise your turns are, how perfect your dips are. It's like how they judge gymnastics.
Well, I was going to say, like, figure skating.
Figure skating.
Kind of like...
Yeah. And, like, you can, like, do different versions of different dances where you can, like, write your own dances and stuff, but it's a tango, but it's your own version of a tango. It's crazy.
I feel like I'd rather learn the tango than the waltz.
Well, yeah, it's a lot...
That's what I mean. I feel like there's more emotion behind the tango.
It's passion. It's supposed to be passionate.
Oh, Melanie's watched competitive ballroom dancing on PBS.
It's intense.
I might have to look this up. I mean...
The girl that I was friends with in Russia, she competed on, like, a national level at, like, 16. She was crazy good.
I could never do that.
Her dad was a ballroom dancing instructor.
Oh, that's awesome. Your sister was a competitive disco dancer.
That's cool.
Right? That's cool.
That's cool.
Totally off topic from dancing, but did you see the chess robot, like, broke a kid's finger?
No.
Yeah. I thought of it because I'm pretty sure the kid was from Russia, but he was competing against this computer robot in chess, as people do, because competing against computers is just how to show how good you are at chess now. And the robot, like, grabbed his finger and just broke it. Someone programmed it to cheat. You can't win if you can't move your pieces.
Yeah, I guess.
Right? What a sore loser.
Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't a terrible chapter, but...
Now, I'm no dancer, but chess was my thing.
I'm not a dancer either.
I used to play, like, chess at school. I wasn't in, like, chess club, but we always had like there were chessboards set up at the library, and I would always go there on my free mods, and we'd play. And that was pretty good.
Sorry, Lola.
There was
Sorry.
like 2 kids that just I could never beat, but otherwise I was pretty good.
I played in Russia a lot,
Yeah.
and then never played again after that because they had no one to play with.
Right? He made the kid a sore winner. See, she has to be on both of us.
Should I just read the next one?
Sure, unless you want to keep talking about our chess accolades.
I don't have any chess accolades.
I don't really either, unfortunately. I would like to get back into playing chess. I like playing chess.
We could play anytime. We have chessboard.
All right. Well,
Have to just play sometime.
I guess so.
All right.
Next stream, we play chess.
Okay. That's dangerous, Lola.
Yeah, just don't stick your nails out.
Let's read the next one. See how many we can get done before we sign off tonight. Because the more we read, the less we have to read later.
That's true. I don't remember when you said you wanted to end the stream.
Let's read the next one and see where we're at. See how long this one takes.
Okay.
We could play Cards Against Muggles again.
Oh yeah, we could definitely do that. That was so fun.
It was.
Need to get the expansion pack.
All right. Chapter 165. The War. Dulce et decorum est. Sirius didn't speak again. At first, Remus tried to be understanding. He did everything he could think of. He got up. He made tea. Offered whiskey, though Sirius shook his head at that. He tried talking to him, but Sirius just stared at the article. Is there anything you need? I'll get you anything at all, just say. Nothing. Sirius just blinked and began rereading from the top. There was a photograph of a tall terraced house in a posh part of London, but Remus couldn't see much else, and Sirius was clutching the newspaper so hard his knuckles turned white. It was frightening. Remus stood beside him, reached out and touched his shoulder, which was stiff as a statue's. Sirius barely reacted. Remus left the room. He went to the front door where their jackets were hung, one soft and brown, one silver-studded black leather. He reached into the pocket of the leather jacket and pulled out the silver compact mirror inside. He cracked it open. Prongs? Prongs! James's face appeared, dark-eyed and concerned. Mooney? It's Sirius. Something's happened. I know. James cut him off. I just saw the paper. I'll be 2 minutes. He vanished, and the mirror just flashed back Remus's own distressed face. Still, that was a relief. James would know just what to do. Remus hated himself for thinking it, but one thing kept blaring in his mind like a foghorn. Was it werewolves? Was it greyback? He needed to read the article. He needed to find out as much as possible. The fireplace suddenly blazed green and James stepped through, casting around. He looked at Remus. Bedroom, Remus said. James nodded and went straight through without a word. Remus closed his eyes, breathing deeply. He could make more tea. He really wanted a proper drink, but it was early in the day, and if Sirius didn't want any, then it would look pretty bad if Remus started on the gin. Fuck. Sirius had been so good when Hope died. How? At the time, Remus had taken it for granted, and now he couldn't think of a single useful thing to say or do. Regulus was dead. Sirius's brother was dead. Remus went back into the bedroom. James was sitting on the bed, an arm round Sirius, talking in his ear very low. Sirius looked as though he were only half listening as he stared into space. The paper had been dropped finally and lay on the floor, half under the bed. He made his choice a long time ago, James was saying. You mustn't blame yourself. You mustn't let this... It doesn't say what happened, Sirius said, finally speaking, his voice deeper than usual. Does anyone know? Your dad or Moody? Was there an attack last night, or... James shook his head, arm still round Sirius.
No, nothing that would suggest... But of course we might have missed something. There's evidence that Voldemort's been killing Death Eaters to keep them in line. Some of them are having doubts, you know. Remus remembered the werewolf's sinister occupation. Perhaps Greyback hadn't been enough of a threat for some of the old families. Voldemort had to make an example. That made some sense. Apparently it did to Sirius too. His eyes focused, narrowing. He sniffed, though he hadn't shed one tear, and straightened his back, shrugging off James. "Well then," he said brusquely. "Got what he deserved, didn't he?" James glanced at Remus and they shared a worried look. "Mate," James said, "he was your brother. It's okay if—" "No!" Sirius stood up sharply, forcing James to get up too, staggering back against the wardrobe. "He wasn't my brother. They're not my family. That was always made very clear." "But you—" "He was my enemy. He'd have killed every one of us without a second thought. So I'm glad he's gone. One less Death Eater. Good. Brilliant." He looked at James and Remus as if challenging them. Neither of them dared. "I'm going to take a shower," he said, and left the room. Remus gnawed his lip. James let out a heavy sigh. "At least he's up, I suppose." "Regulus, you little shit! It's like his final act was to mess with Sirius's head." "I know what you mean," Remus said, trying to see the funny side. "It feels like this any time things start getting back to normal, another catastrophe hits." "Moody would say, that's war, lads," James replied just as humorlessly. They went quiet for a bit and heard the boiler in the bathroom grinding as Sirius turned on the hot water. James ran his fingers through his hair. "It'll be over for good one day. I know it will, Mooney. We've just got to do our best until then." Remus nodded, and he did feel a bit better. James had that power. He could bring optimism to even the darkest hour. "How are your folks?" Remus asked, aware that James had left his sick parents very suddenly. "They're okay. Mum's panicking about flower arrangements. Pete and his mum are visiting, and Lily's there, so they're not alone. I didn't tell them about this. There wasn't time, and I don't want to put any more strain on them. They'd want to come over and check on them." "And if he's decided to be like this about it," Remus said, "then I think it's best not to fuss too much." "You're right," James said tiredly. He gave Remus a soft smile. "You were always right when it came to him, eh?" Remus shrugged, because he thought James was being awfully kind. Usually Remus thought he was doing a terrible job of taking care of Sirius. That's because he is.
That's right.
"I tried to contact Moody," James continued, back to business. "See if he knows anything, but he's not answering. To be honest," James lowered his voice, leaning in to confide in Remus, "I don't think Regulus was particularly high priority for anybody. It's only because he's a black that he ended up in the paper at all." "You think it was Voldemort, though? Who killed him?" "Seemed likely. He's getting desperate, Dad reckons. No one thought the war would go on this long. It's not just our side that's flagging." They went through the living room and Remus made more tea. They were almost out of PG tips, and he scribbled down a note to pin to their cork notice board, which hung beside the fridge. Once they sat down, Remus finally read the article in the paper. Black heir confirmed dead. Regulus Arcturus Black II, only child of Orion and Walpurga Black, has today been confirmed dead in a statement issued from the Black family home in Islington. Born in 1961, the heir to the Black house and fortune was 18 years old. He'd recently completed his education at Hogwarts School for Witchcraft and Wizardry, where he distinguished himself as an impeccable student and gifted Quidditch player. Regulus is survived by his parents and his cousins, who will attend a private memorial service later in the week. The family have requested privacy. That was all. There wasn't much else to say about such a short life, Remus supposed, and what had been said was largely untrue, or at least a smudged version of the truth. There was no mention of at all how he died, but Remus thought that was probably a good thing. At least it definitely wasn't Greyback. The Daily Prophet wouldn't miss a chance to slip in a bit of werewolf bashing. Sirius came into the living room, hair dripping, towel round his waist. "I think I'll work on the bike today," he said to the room, not really looking at either James or Remus. "Go home, Potter. I'm fine," and left again, presumably to get dressed. James and Remus looked at each other again. "Will you be okay?" James asked. "If I go?" "Yeah, of course." "Okay." James hoisted himself up out of the armchair and went to the fireplace. You have the mirror if you need me. I'll pop back this evening." "We'll be fine," Remus said, getting up to say goodbye. "He just needs a bit of space." "Don't give it to him," James said suddenly, looking Remus in the eye. "Moony, I need you to keep an eye on him, okay? Don't let him go anywhere. Don't let him try to get in touch with anyone he's related to. Except Andromeda, I suppose." Remus nodded. That wouldn't be too hard. Sirius never spoke to his relations. "No problem." "I mean it. He might do something stupid and we can't risk it. Plenty of people still think Sirius is, untrustworthy because of his name, and something like this is going to—" James pinked the bridge of his nose as if he were getting a headache. "Bloody Regulus," he muttered again. "I'll look after him," Remus said firmly. "Don't worry." "Thanks, Moony." James gripped his arm, and it was as if they were 13 again, juggling responsibility for their wayward friend. James left, and Sirius appeared at once, as if he'd been waiting. "Were you talking about me?" "Of course we were." Remus jutted out his chin. "We're worried about you." "What did Prongs say?" "That I'm not to let you out of my sight." Sirius snorted. "You'll have to come to the garage then." "Fine," Remus smiled breezily. "Lead the way." He was determined to do as James had instructed, if only because he had no idea how to be useful. Remus had only been to their shared garage once. There were a few things stored there, mainly Sirius's Quidditch kit and various childhood things that wouldn't fit in the flat. And the bike, of course. It was a Triumph Bonneville T120, the same as the one Sirius had first fallen in love with years at the Potters. He'd painted a lion on the tank and done some kind of enlarging spell on the body. Sirius pulled out a rag and polished it, though it was already glistening. Remus stood quietly by, watching. Sirius prodded it with his wand in a few places, oiled it in others. "When do you think it'll be finished?" Remus asked finally. "Ready to ride?" "Last week," Sirius replied, not looking up. "You what?" "It's done. Engine runs, flying function works. I'm finished. I think so, anyway. Haven't taken it out yet." "Why not?" Sirius just shrugged and resumed his polishing. Remus watched him a bit longer. Obviously, Sirius didn't feel like talking, and that was fair enough. Remus understood that better than most people, but he also understood the need to do something when you couldn't express yourself properly. "Let's go then," he said. Sirius, crouching in front of the bike, rocked back on his heels and looked at Remus. "Go? Go where?" "Anywhere you like," Remus shrugged. "Let's take it for a spin." Sirius blinked. "Really? You'll come with me?" "Well, I'm hardly going to let you fly off on that death trap alone, am I?" Remus laughed. "What sort of boyfriend would I be if I didn't follow you into the jaws of certain doom?" The ghost of a smile flickered on Sirius's face, and he stood up. "Okay then," he nodded. "Let's do it." Remus had never liked flying. He was competent on a broom these days, but it had never been his chosen form of transportation. He just didn't like heights very much. Still, he would do almost anything for Sirius, so he clambered on the back seat and wrapped his arms round Sirius's waist and took lots of very deep breaths. Sirius actually laughed at him, which was progress. "Moony, are you sure you want to do this? I can feel your heart pounding." "Absolutely," Remus nodded, squeezing his eyes shut as Sirius gripped the handlebars. "I'm sure I've faced worse than your driving." "Well, if you're sure." Sirius revved the engine, and Remus clung on tighter as the seat began to rumble. They went slowly at first. Sirius navigated carefully out of the garage, pointing his wand at the door so that it closed and locked behind them, then trundled slowly along the quiet back street. Then he flicked a switch and pressed down on his foot, and they sped away. Remus still trying not to look, his stomach doing backflips. "Here we go," Sirius called out, and Remus buried his head in Sirius's shoulder as they lifted off the ground, engine roaring as they gained height. Remus felt himself sliding backwards and yelped as his tailbone hit the metal back of his seat. "Christ!" he whimpered. He really was going to die. Sirius laughed again. "We did it, Mooney!" he cried. "Open your..."
That serious voice is taking a toll on you today.
It really is. I'm having a struggle today. "Open your eyes, you big wuss!" Remus did and instantly regretted it. They were a few 100 feet above the London skyline already. He could see the broad concrete rooftops and beige streets below. The people looked like tadpoles and the cars like beetles, and it was such a long way down. "Oh my God," he moaned. Sirius cheered happily. "Isn't it amazing?" He was facing forward, eyes on the horizon. It was blue skies as far as the eye could see. The wind rushed past their ears, cold and fresh, and Remus had to squint against the sun. "Amazing!" he shouted back, feeling quite sick, but pleased that Sirius was happy. They zoomed all over London for the better part of an hour, going as slow as Sirius dared along the winding Thames, taking sharp corners round skyscrapers, and almost crashing right into the dome of St. Paul's. Finally, the engine began to slow, and Remus noticed they were losing height. He looked down bravely and squinted at the unfamiliar streets below. "Where are we?" "Islington." "What? Sirius!" Shit. He was supposed to be keeping him away from the blacks, and now they were headed straight for them. "Calm down," Sirius replied as they sank even further. They appeared to be aiming for a huge sketch of green space, a public park with trees and a lake and neat gravel paths around brightly coloured flower beds. The landing was less than perfect. They hit the grass so hard they drove great muddy tracks in it, and Remus was finally thrown from the saddle altogether, though he was so relieved to be back on solid ground he could have kissed the grass. "Bugger," Sirius said, cutting the engine and leaping off gracefully. "I'll get better at that. You okay?" He held out a hand to help Remus up. "Fine, I think." Remus brushed his trousers and arms. "Where are we?" "Highbury Fields." Sirius cast obfuscate on the bike and then did his best to mend the ruined lawn. "I used to come here a lot before I left home." "Oh, right," Remus said softly. "With Reg?" "Sometimes," Sirius sniffed. "Our governess brought us." Remus decided to store away this revelation that Sirius had had a governess for another time. "It's nice," he said, looking around at the lush green parkland. "Pretty. Want to show me around?" Sirius smiled at him gratefully, and they went for a quiet Sunday afternoon walk. Here and there Sirius would stop and point something out. A tree he'd climbed once, or a bridge he'd hidden under. Remus enjoyed listening. He'd rarely ever heard any happy childhood memories from Sirius, and for a little while he even forgot why they were there. They stopped by the war memorial. It was particularly fancy. Remus supposed because there was a fair bit of money in Islington. Atop the white plinth stood the green-hued statue of a young woman in ancient robes, holding aloft a laurel crown, an allegory for victory. "I did my first magic here," Sirius said with a grin, "when I was 4. "Really? What did you do?" "Set fire to her head," he nodded at the statue. "Always been a rebel." "Amazing," Remus laughed. "Yeah. Jusine, our governess, went mad trying to put it out, but we kept laughing, me and Reggie, and every time she extinguished it, I just did it again, because it made him so happy." Sirius looked down. He was quiet for a while, and Remus just put a hand on his shoulder to show he didn't have to speak if he didn't want to. They looked at the plaque on the memorial. "How sleep the brave who sink to rest, by all their country's wishes blessed." Remus couldn't help but wonder about the names of the men listed below. How old had they been? Robert Fenn, Peter Cross, Arthur Hill. Had they all thought they were doing the right thing? Had they all been brave in their last moments? Had they thought of their family, their brothers? And when this war was over, would there be a plaque just like this in Diagon Alley? Whose names would it bear? Not Regulus's. "Come on," Sirius said finally. "I'm ready to go home now."
Well, now we know why Hagrid was able to fit on the motorbike.
Yep. I suppose so.
Sirius did an enlarging charm. Yeah, no witches or wizards have ever rode an airplane. Well, nah. I guess the Muggle ones. Sure, Lily has. Hermione.
They were talking about the creature chapter. Blew my mind the first time I read it. I cried through it. I died reading the creature chapter. Reading the creature chapter for the first time, I cried too.
Yeah, it was a rough one. And also, welcome, Vane. I didn't see you here earlier, so I'm assuming you just jumped in.
They're all just like, we used to listen to everyone else until they found me.
I know.
That's so sweet.
We gotta get something up. And if they say no, we gotta make a petition or something.
Yeah, right?
Rolling. Let's do it.
Rolling, just listen to it for 5 seconds, please.
Speaking of audiobooks that we can put up, though, right now, Pride and Prejudice is winning in the poll.
I see that in
by a decent margin.
I see that Pride and Prejudice is pulling ahead here.
32%.
I know.
With Grimm's Fairy Tales coming in at a close second at 27%. And then finally in third, Frankenstein with 18%. And everything else is a bit lower.
Yeah, I see that.
So if you still haven't put in your vote yet, you can at the link that I am posting now in the chat.
Yes, vote for what book we will be reading. I guess starting, depending.
Tomorrow I'm closing the poll, so
yes,
we'll start it this coming week.
So yeah, depending on which book wins, we'll start reading.
Submit the bill to Congress. That's right.
That's right. AOC would totally support me.
Biden himself. I want her audiobook.
Yeah, he would.
You can become the presidential bedtime reader.
I would do it.
You have to read Biden a bedtime story every night.
Okay. I will do that.
Or whoever's the president.
It's sleepy time, Joe. It's time for a story. Although, if you know who gets selected, I'm not reading him a bedtime story every night.
Oh, you'll read him a bedtime story. Night, night, Mr. President.
That's true. Yeah, okay.
Oh, man. You just read the speeches for all the presidents. No one would give a speech anymore. You just had to read them.
I would be the official reader of the speeches. I would do that.
They just stand behind and like lip sync with it.
20 years ago.
Lex for president.
Okay.
I don't know. You would just turn the whole country into a big cat sanctuary. Oh, and kangaroo sanctuary.
I wouldn't do that.
You have no rights. Animals are taking over.
I would ban the import of all kangaroo products.
I know. I'm just joking.
Yeah, I was just kind of making it up, Melanie. I wasn't trying to actually quote it. I had to memorize it a long time ago, but I still don't remember it now.
I never had to memorize it.
I had to memorize it, and we had to stand up in class and, like, speak it.
Oh. Did you get to, like, dress up as Lincoln?
No.
Oh, that would have been fun.
I know.
They had, like, a beard and a top hat.
Yeah,
and, like, put it on, and you get to go up there. 4 score!
I did do a presentation on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest when I was in high school. We had to read a book and then do a 10-minute presentation on a book. Presentation on a book. So I did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I did a big cartoon drawing of all the characters as the Last Supper, and McMurphy was Jesus in the middle, and then
I wore I brought in a broom and I had like an inmate shirt and I like swept around the class and like told the story of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as if I was
Oh yeah, you told me.
Yeah.
I remember this now.
As
I don't
if-
remember the Last Supper.
Yeah, there was a Last Supper drawing, and I was chief, and I just swept the floor. The first 2 minutes, my whole class was looking at me like, "What the fuck is she doing?"
Then
'Cause
they started to get it.
I waited like a full minute before I spoke. I just swept down the aisles for like a full minute before I said anything, and they were all just like, "What the fuck?" Got a 100 on that project.
I was gonna say, I mean, that sounds great.
My teacher loved it.
I mean,
Loved it.
It does sound awesome. Yeah, that is true. I mean, you basically are a neighbor.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
hours away.
yeah. You're super close. And yet we've never met in person. Lola, what are you doing?
Maybe we'll see you at the state fair. Who knows? When is that?
Lola, what are you doing? Yeah, walking over this way, not in the corner. That's right. Sorry.
See, we never got to do. I guess the only time we got to do something fun like that is we got to act out Romeo and Juliet. But otherwise, it was like we just set the desk in a big like circle, and we all have our parts to play, or you know, you read this paragraph, and then the next person reads this paragraph, and so on and so forth.
We just did Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, and Caesar, where everybody picked a character. They had to say all the lines for each character.
Yeah, we did that too.
But we never did the paragraph thing. We did not end up going to the Renaissance Fair because they are only open on the weekends, and I had to work. So that is how that went.
Yes.
So we'll just have to go next year.
So instead, we ended up going to a water park with Ramona.
Yep, we went
because we couldn't take her to the Renaissance Fair.
We went to Water Safari instead.
It was actually a bummer because it looked so interesting.
I know, you've never been.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been a good time. The Tartan Terrors weren't there though. The one time I went to the Renaissance Fair, there was a band there called the Tartan Terrors, and they sang traditional Scottish folk music.
Oh, okay.
But then they also sang their modern songs that they wrote in that tradition.
Oh, that's cool.
I still have their album, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's cool.
Scotland's Depraved is one of their originals. Scotsmen wear their kilts all day, zippers scare the sheep away. England is prim and proper, Scotland's depraved. Bring me my lover, mother. No, not my brother, mother. England is prim and
still
Scotland's
their
depraved.
thing.
I hope so too. They were really awesome. I loved them. They were great. Bane says they're really not too far apart. Yeah, you can send us an email. You can put your email in there. You can email us your question.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah.
I know our email's on the channel, but it's also bibliobibuli.yt@gmail.com.
I mean, it would be cool to meet up at the fair. If I can get away from work, let's do it.
For sure.
Let's do it.
You can we'll bring a soapbox and you can just start reading Harry Potter.
I'm down. I'll bring one of the books with me, and I'll just start reading it out loud. People can gather around, pick a chapter, and I'll read it. That being said, I think we have time for one more chapter.
Oh, okay.
Do we want to do one more?
Yeah, why not?
All right.
We got time, why not?
We got the time. Let's do one more.
Let's get it in. What is the title of this one? Let's try to guess what's going to happen here.
Autumn 1979.
Oh, it's a wedding.
Yeah, I think so.
Chapter 166. The War. Autumn, 1979. Well, I take whatever I want, and baby, I want you. You give me something that I need. Now tell me I got something for you. Come on, come on, come on, come on and do it. Come on and do what you do. I can't get enough of your love. I can't get enough of your love. I can't get enough of your love. Friday, 7th of September, 1979. Bugger, Remus groaned, cradling his shoulder and biting his lip. Padfoot came bounding over, yapped, then transformed back into Sirius. What's up? Dislocated, Remus grinned, still clutching his arm. Have you got my wand? Yeah, hang on. All right, Mooney. James and Peter came sauntering out of the thicket. That was great. Yeah, great. Remus accepted his wand from Sirius and pointed it at his sore arm. He thought about Livia and Cassa, as he did every full moon since meeting the pack. He hoped they were both safe, and he sort of wished he had them nearby, just for the healing benefits. Arm fixed, or as close as he could get to it, he struggled to his feet and pulled on his clothes, stashed under a nearby bush. Okay? Sirius asked, watching him warily. You look a bit shaky. Just hurts a bit, Remus said, having to stop himself from shrugging. Can I side along with you to get back? Of course. Oi, Prongs! Sirius nudged James with his elbow, grinning. Bloody good stag do, eh? Eh? Stag do? Yes, Padfoot, very funny, James snorted. Just as funny as the last 100 times. I'm wasted on you lot, Sirius sighed. Less than 24 hours to go, Peter said. How are you feeling? Tired, James said with a yawn. Shall we? They apparated back to the Potters, which was already a hive of activity. They'd hired 4 extra house elves in preparation for the wedding the next day, and the tiny little creatures darted back and forth across the kitchen, whipping up a feast. Lily and Mrs. Potter were sitting at the kitchen table, Mrs. Potter in her dressing gown and slippers, which she was never out of these days. Lily jumped up to kiss James. Morning, darling. I stayed long enough just to see you, but I'll be off now. How are you, Remus? Remus nodded, blank and exhausted. Lily cocked her head and tutted. Go to bed, the lot of you. You all need your beauty sleep. James, I've left you a list of things you need to get sorted this afternoon. Give me a ring when it's all finished, or I'll never sleep. Sirius, did he give you the rings? Oh, no, silly me, I've got them. Here you go. Remus, but will you make sure he doesn't lose them? Pete, your mum popped round and said you'd gone out with the lads and was sleeping off a hangover, so better if you don't go home. I'm sending Mary over this evening with the buttonholes for you all, and the ties if Madam Malkin hurries up and gets them finished. Oh, do you all have shoes? Merlin, Evans, Sirius yawned. Anyone would think you're getting married tomorrow. She stuck her tongue out at him, kissed James, hugged Remus, and hurried out the door. Go to bed, boys, she shouted as she left. See you at the top of the aisle, Potter. Remus looked down at the list Lily had left James. It was at least 15 inches of parchment, and Lily had small handwriting. James ignored it. All right, Mum, he said, going over to Mrs. Potter. She had 2 dark smudges under her eyes, and her hair was pale and stringy. Remus was finding it hard to meet her eye these days. She reminded him so much of his last visit with Hope. Fine, fine, she beamed up at him. There's so much to do. Leave it for now, he said, an arm round her. Let's all go to bed. That Lily, Mrs. Potter said as they made slow progress up the stairs. She's a force to be reckoned with. Too right, the boys all agreed. Remus collapsed into bed without even taking his clothes off and could have fallen asleep right there. Mooney, Sirius yawned again, pulling his boots off. Don't conk out until you've had your potion. McKinnon's orders. Ugh. Remus groaned, rolling over and reaching for the bottle on the bedside table. Sirius clambered in beside him as he finished it. Whose idea was it to have a wedding right after a full moon? He complained, another yawn encroaching. I told you all just leave me to it, Remus. Whose idea was it to have a wedding right after a full moon? He complained, another yawn encroaching. I told you all to just leave me to it, Remus replied, closing his eyes and flinging an arm over his face. And miss the chance to make stag-do puns for the rest of the week? No chance. Remus chuckled and quickly fell asleep. Having never attended a wedding in his life, Remus was very grateful to Lily for having left a list. It meant he always knew what to do. However, he quickly learnt that very little about weddings made no sense at all. For example, once they'd all woken up round midday, their first task was to decorate the Quidditch hoops in the back garden. "Why are we doing this?" Remus asked, frowning up at the goals, as Peter arrived, levitating a crate of white flowers. "So they look nice," James replied, broom in hand. "It's the only way Lily would get married under them." Remus stared at him. "You're getting married under your old Quidditch hoops?" "I know," he grinned. "Brilliant, isn't it?" Moony," Sirius said quickly. "You and Pete work on the growing charm down there. Prongs and I will fly up and do the hoops." Once they were finished, the 3 goalposts looked like a bizarre, spindly rose bush had taken over. Next, they just had to decorate the nearby trees with the same flowers and summon all of the chairs from the Potter's extensive attic, then get them all to line up properly in neat rows of 8. After that, Mrs. Potter asked Peter and Sirius to help her with all the crockery for the reception and give James and Sirius instructions to sort out the ballroom. "Ballroom?" Remus looked at James confused. He'd been visiting the Potters for years now and felt that he knew the house pretty well, but he'd never seen a ballroom. "Yeah, we don't use it much," James replied casually. "Keep it in storage." "In storage?" How on earth you stored an entire room, Remus didn't know. "Yep, I just need to remember where the instructions are." They went into James's dad's study, and James located a map inside of one of the desk drawers. Remus got quite interested then. He would always be very fond of maps. This one was a blueprint for the Potter's mansion, which made it extra fascinating. There were all kinds of special little spells and enchantments labelled on it, but they had work to do, so he couldn't get a good look. The ballroom was hidden behind the living room couch. James and Remus both had to concentrate very hard and murmur some ancient incantations to get the doors to appear. Then, of course, the couch had to be moved and the door unlocked, which was annoyingly fiddly. When James finally pushed the oak-panelled double doors open, Remus's jaw dropped. It was one of the most beautiful rooms he'd ever seen. Art Deco marble pillars as far as the eye could see, and a glorious stained glass ceiling which cast jewelled-coloured patches of sunlight onto the dark hardwood floor. "Bloody hell," he swallowed, feeling very small. He remembered watching Sirius and Lily rehearsing dance steps in their tiny living room, and the first time in a long time, Remus felt very poor and grubby next to his wealthy pure-blood friends. "I know," James laughed. "Stupid, isn't it? But at least we'll fit everyone in. I think we've got 33 Weasleys coming already." Feeling a bit better, Remus set about helping James check the room, and then they conjured some mops to begin sweeping the floor. James closed the doors while they did this so that they would not be disturbed. "I know we're not really doing anything," he said guiltily, leaning against a marble column. "But I just want 5 minutes without someone giving me an order. I wouldn't mind, but Moody's only giving us 2 days off for the wedding. We're expected to report for duty on Sunday." "Christ," Remus shook his head, tutting. They stood quietly for a bit, watching the mops glide back and forth like funny, skinny ballroom dancers. Remus was grateful for a breather too. The weekend had begun with a full moon and was only going to get more hectic as it went on. "How's Sirius?" James asked out of the blue. Fine. Why?" Remus frowned. "Just checking." "You see them as almost as much as I do," Remus teased him. It was true. James was much keener on the flying motorbike than Remus was, and they went for rides together almost every evening. "I know," James nodded. "But he hasn't said anything since Regulus died. Well, he hasn't said anything about Regulus since he died." "No," Remus sighed. "No, he wasn't." It wasn't as if Remus had been pushing Sirius to talk about it either, but he didn't think James would understand their policy of never discussing family stuff. "I don't like him bottling it up," James said. I know he had a complicated relationship with Reg, but it can't be normal to just pretend like he never existed." "Who's to say what's normal?" Remus countered. "Everyone grieves differently." "So is he grieving?" James was giving Remus a very intense look, and it made him uncomfortable. He didn't like other people asking him about Sirius's personal stuff. That was between them. "Yeah, of course," he lied. That seemed to work. "Good, I've been worried about him. It's been a shit year all round, eh?" "Could say that," Remus snorted. "It's about to get a lot better, though. Any pre-game nerves?" "Nah," James grinned, the worry leaving his face. "Feel like I've already won the cup." "Oh my God, Prongs, you soppy git. That's what you get for going out with girls." James roared with laughter, and by the time he'd regained his composure, the mops had finished their task, and the floor was gleaming as if brand new. Saturday, 8th of September, 1979. The first wedding Remus had ever attended was the most beautiful and the happiest, and there was no way you could convince him otherwise. Everything went off without a hitch. Well, he did have to talk an overexcited Sirius out of transforming into Padfoot to deliver the rings, but luckily it was only a fleeting mania, and it was smiles all round. James's parents looked as though they would burst with pride, both appearing healthier than Remus had seen them in ages, decked out in red and gold dress robes, Gryffindor colours. Marlene and Mary made beautiful bridesmaids in simple pale mauve dresses with circlets of gypsophilia in their hair, and of course Lily herself was a vision in white lace. It seemed to Remus that the day flew by in a pastel-hued blur. He was always supposed to be somewhere, or doing something. There was barely a moment to relax and take stock. He was very glad he'd never be getting married, because just being a groomsman was exhausting enough. Once the ceremony was over and they had to start mingling, Remus found himself feeling very shy. He hadn't been around so many witches and wizards since Hogwarts. The magic in the air was palpable, muggy. It bothered him less now. His time with Greyback's pack had taught him to cope with it, and as long as he didn't need to do magic, he was fine. There were plenty of people he knew, of course. He spotted the Weasleys without too much bother. Arthur and Molly were running round all over the place after their 5 rambunctious red-headed sons. The eldest two had decided they wanted to play Quidditch with the decorated hoops now that the boring bit of the day was out of the way. Then, of course, Moody and Hagrid and Dumbledore, and lots of other people from the Order. It was nice to see them all at a happy event for once. It made everyone look younger. Frank and Alice were just back from their honeymoon, which Alice confided to Remus had actually involved quite a lot of work. They'd gone to Slovenia on a knowledge transfer mission with the local Auras. And of course Ferox was there. He came over to shake Remus's hand manfully. "Looking very smart, Lupin," he nodded, and Remus felt himself blush from head to toe, though he knew Sirius looked a million times better in exactly the same robes. "And Miss McDonnell?" Ferox kissed her hand, which made her blush too. "Very beautiful indeed. Will it be wedding bells for you two next?" Remus blinked. He hadn't come out to very many people, fair enough, but he sort of thought most people had cottoned on by now. Mary laughed. "As if Remus would marry me. I'd drive him up the wall." "Ah, well," Ferox clapped him on the shoulder. "You're still young. Lots of wild oats to sow." "I live with Sirius," Remus said, raising his eyebrows a little bit to see if his old teacher took the hint, but apparently not. Why were grown-ups always so dense? "Freewheeling bachelors, eh?" Ferox laughed gruffly. Mary looked as though she were about to say something, but Remus caught her eye and gave the tiniest shake of his head. Not worth it. "That's right," he nodded enthusiastically to Ferox. After dinner, the best part of the day in Remus's opinion, James and Lily cut the cake, a huge towering affair with 13 tiers covered in buttercream icing and pink-piped roses, and then the dancing began. Lily did Sirius proud. Remus could hear him counting under his breath as he watched them. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Straighten that back, Evans. Good girl. The waltz over and done with, someone cast an amplifying charm on the Potter's old turntable, and a Bad Company song began playing, which got all the young people up and dancing, including Sirius, who Remus was grateful to hand over to Andromeda. Remus Lupin did not dance. He was happy enough to sit by with a glass of champagne just watching, as usual. He looked for Peter, who liked to dance but often lost steam after a few songs, but he couldn't see him anywhere. He'd probably found some friends from work and gone to chat with them. Yaz and Marlene were on the dance floor. They were both pretty dreadful. Marlene wasn't used to heels, but it was very sweet all the same. Yaz had cut her hair since leaving Hogwarts in June, and the cropped pixie look really suited her. Mary came to Remus's rescue in the end, as always. She hobbled over with a pained expression on her face and plonked down beside him. "Blimey, these French knickers she's got us in go right up your bum." "Charming as ever, MacDonald," Remus smirked. Lily and James whirled past them, smiling at each other like maniacs. "Look at them," Mary sighed. "Why can't I find a bloke who loves me that much, eh? Not like I haven't been looking." "You'll find him," Remus replied, just as happy. "I'll know it when I see it. That's what my mum says." "If you're lucky," Remus snorted. He was a bit drunker than he initially thought, and his tongue was loose. But it was only Mary. "They say love is blind for a reason." "I've never had trouble recognizing it, to be honest," Mary confided. "It's letting it in that's the hard part." Remus nodded in agreement, though he wasn't sure he followed. She continued, sipping her champagne. "Like you did with Sirius." "Oh yeah, my freewheeling bachelor friend." Remus poked his tongue out, making Mary crease up, giggling. Remus grinned, happy to make her happy. He squeezed her knee. "You're going to fall in love one day. How could you not? Anyone would be lucky to have you." "Maybe once the war is over," she said, lowering her voice, still watching the dancing. "I'm not sure I could survive falling in love right now. Not with everything else on top." Remus looked away. "Hiya!" Marlene appeared, drink in hand. "Remus, your boyfriend stole me partner." She nodded across the dance floor at Sirius and Yaz, who were swinging each other round wildly, apparently unable to decide who should lead. Remus laughed and Mary frowned, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Marlene gave her a sympathetic look. "French knickers? French knickers?" Marlene nodded warily. Marlene leaned in and whispered, "I took mine off in the loos after the ceremony." "Oh my God, McKinnon, you genius!" Mary sat up abruptly and strode across the room toward the doors. Marlene laughed, taking her seat. One of the Weasley kids came skidding past, sliding on his knees across the highly polished ballroom floor. Molly came chasing after him. Molly came chasing after him, panting, "William Arthur Weasley, you will ruin those trousers!" Marlene giggled, covering her mouth with her hand politely. She leaned in and whispered to Remus, "I heard her tell Hattie Bones she's pregnant again, and she only just had the twins last year." "Crikey," Remus said, developing a whole new respect for quiet and reserved Arthur Weasley. "I reckon those two are having kids as soon as possible." Marlene nodded at James and Lily. "Be surprised if we don't get an announcement before Christmas." Really?" Remus wrinkled his nose. Weddings were one thing. They only lasted a day. But babies? They had to do babies now? "Don't be such a grumpy sod." Marlene gave him a sharp elbow. "Change is part of life. Come on, treat me to a dance. Be nice to have a partner that's taller than me." She stood up and tugged on his wrist. Remus sighed. "Okay, but only because they haven't served cake yet."
Arthur, get off of her.
Yep, everyone's like, "Run! Run!"
Yep. Ron's in the story finally.
Ron,
Kind of.
So, yay. I mean, his birthday is in March. It's about time.
Yeah.
Arthur.
I love, like, Remus's response. Yeah, a whole new respect for him that day. One after another.
They would have grown up together. That's kind of what's sad about it.
Yeah.
They would have all been friends and gone over to each other's houses and grown up together.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they got there in the end.
They did.
But, yeah.
Gosh darn you, Voldemort.
Terrible person.
Hate that guy.
He's kind of a jerk.
We don't know.
That's true. I mean, Arthur could be the victim here. The man just comes home tired from work, just wants to go to bed, but Mrs. Weasley just holds him hostage. Called Molly Wobbles for a reason.
I was gonna say he does call her Molly Wobbles, and she really wants a girl.
Yeah.
Maybe she's just like, Arthur, we're doing this until I have a girl.
But I'm tired. Shut up.
Yes, that's true. Melanie makes a statement. In the Muggle world, Hermione is just about ready to be born.
Yeah. I wonder if we'll get like a little hint at Hermione or something.
Like they walk by a dentist.
Yeah, like some dentist.
Has like a baby in his arms or something.
Like Ranger Dentistry or something.
That would be cute. That
Right.
would be cute. It's only 5 after 7, so we could do one more.
This is gonna turn into one more. Well, one more. Okay, one more. I'm down to read it. It's funny.
Well, it's only,
like,
it's...
And then you're like...
Well, I didn't know how long it was going to take me. So...
It was a bit of a lengthy chapter.
I didn't mind this one, though. Like, this one was cute. It was okay.
Any chapter with James and Lily has been good.
Yeah.
We need more James and Lily.
Yeah,
it's when Sirius and Remus are alone.
That's when it sucks.
It's just always depressing. They're only alone to argue.
All right.
Or do the baby making thing.
Because Remus is using him.
Yeah.
Every time. I also think we should just get this chapter out of the way because of the summary, and we should just...
Oh, are we going to end on a bad note?
I don't know.
Well, what are the warnings? I'm sure there's trigger warnings in here.
Okay.
Oh, Dan just poured coffee, so we got to keep going.
Okay, we got to keep going.
Can't let the caffeine rush go to waste.
That's true.
I'm still hyped up on my tea, so I'm down.
All right, Glenn, no worries. I know it's much, much later where you are.
Yes.
Good night. Sleep well. We'll see you soon.
Truly a trooper for hanging out with us this long.
Yeah, for this late. I also just figured we're not going to get a chance to stream next week, so let's just do one more. This says, we're finishing off 1979 with a few wintry evenings. This chapter, and likely the next few chapters, is really more a series of episodes to give a shape of Remus's life from 1979 onwards. Warnings. Homophobia. Threat of homophobic abuse. Drinking. There's been a lot of drinking in the story so far, but in this chapter particularly, Remus begins showing signs of alcohol dependency, alcoholism. This is deliberate and part of his characterization. From 1980 onwards, it will only get worse. So just a heads up.
Alcohol? What? He's gonna be an alcoholic?
Maddie. Shocker!
But he wasn't an alcoholic. He had a problem with chocolate, but wasn't an alcoholic. Maybe he'll just have a drinking problem. Maybe he will go full alcoholic.
That's why Remus looks so ratty on the train. And asleep.
Wasn't asleep. He was passed out.
Chapter 167. The War. Winter, 1979. I wanna be straight. I wanna be straight. I'm sick and tired of taking drugs and staying up late. I wanna confirm. I wanna conform. I wanna be snug and I wanna be safe and I wanna be warm. I wanna be straight. I wanna be straight. I wanna create a place of my own in the welfare state. I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna be kind. It might be a wrench, but think of the stench I'm leaving behind. I wanna be straight. I wanna be straight. Come out of the cold and do what I'm told and not deviate. I wanna give. I wanna give. I wanna give my consent. I'm learning to hate all the things that were great when I used to be bent.
Very nice. Getting that like punk rock sound going there.
Friday, 23rd of November, 1979.
After all the excitement of autumn, the beginning of winter felt remarkably unremarkable. Remus tried to be grateful for it. For once in his life, things were quiet. He didn't get kidnapped by werewolves. There were no parents' funerals or brothers dying. He tried to make himself useful to the Order. Sometimes they wanted things researched, help identifying curses that the Death Eaters were using, or coming up with new spells that could be used against them. He occasionally worked with Alice on this and got to know her fairly well. She was incredibly intelligent, one of the most skilled duelists Remus had ever met. He got very good at defensive charms and spent a lot of time visiting various safe houses, setting up barriers and early warning systems. Remus worked hard. He threw himself into it. He had a very strong desire to be involved, to strive for something good. Maybe he was growing up. Maybe he was just sick of having no control over his life. Marlene came over a few evenings a week after work. She and Remus would sit up at the kitchen table, and he would tell her as much as he could about being a werewolf, his sense of smell, his increased metabolism, and how he cared for himself during and after a full moon. He tried to be as honest as he could without getting anyone else in trouble, and she diligently took notes, asked questions, and suggested improvements. It was difficult for Remus, but also necessary. Marlene's earnest nature and fierce determination to improve living standards for werewolves made him feel a bit better, like he might be doing some good after all. "We need to get the Ministry away from this idea that cells and bars are the only remedy," she would say. "From what you've told me, woodland is far better for the health of the subject, and we're hardly short of woodland, are we? A few protective barrier spells would do it. All we need is some creative thinking, some compassion." Remus smiled at her. Marlene made him feel like there really would be change one day, and it was nice to spend time with a friend. Sirius was so often out in the evenings on missions or at meetings. "How are you finding it, living with Sirius?" Marlene asked one evening as she was packing up. She looked round at the dark, empty flat. "Quiet over my house." Marlene was still living with her mother and stepdad and Danny ever since he'd been bitten. More recently, Yaz had moved in too. Remus didn't know all the details, but it sounded as though Yaz's parents hadn't been thrilled when they found out about Marlene. "It's fine," Remus nodded, helping her collect together her notes. "Different from school, obviously. But it's nice having your own space." "It can be." Do you fight too much? Do you two fight much? You know, with all the stress in the missions?" Marlene was chewing her lip now, fiddling a loose strand of hair. "No," Remus said reflexively, shutting down as he always did when it came to his private life with Sirius. "Okay," Marlene sighed, lowering her eyes. "Maybe it's just us then. Maybe because my family's round all the time." Remus felt a rush of sympathy for her. He touched her arm. "I bet it's normal with all the stuff everyone's going through lately. Emotions running high and all that." "Maybe." Marlene still looked forlorn. "Look," Remus said, lowering his voice even though they were alone. "The only reason Sirius and I don't argue is that we've barely ever been in the same room, that we're barely in the same room lately. When we are in the same room, we do everything we can to avoid talking about the war, even though it's all either of us can think about." He felt a rush of adrenaline having said this. He rarely spoke so openly about his feelings with anyone but Sirius. Marlene blinked at him tearfully. "Really? You don't talk about it?" "Not since Regulus died." "Oh, of course." She nodded softly, then wiped her eyes with her wrists. "Sometimes I feel like it's all me and Yaz talk about. It's exhausting. God, I can't take all this death and misery. Do you know what Mary said to me the other day? She's thinking of bowing out, giving up." "On the war?" Remus stared, alarmed. "No." Mary shook her head. "Everything. The wizarding world. She says she'd rather take her chances as a muggle with no education. Of course, I know she didn't mean it, but I understand where she's coming from. We've been fighting and fighting, doing everything we can, and it's just not enough, is it? They're winning." "You can't think like that," Remus said. He really didn't want to hear this. It was awful to listen to someone he admired being so pessimistic. She was saying exactly the things that kept him up at night. I know we've got to keep trying no matter what. Marlene said, still crying quietly. But it's taken everything I have, Remus. All I do, all any of us do is work and fight. What if the war ends and there's nothing left for me? What if I can't remember how to be happy? That's bollocks. Remus shook his head vehemently. Of course you know how to be happy. He went over to give her a hug. Marlene was almost as tall as he was, and her fair hair tickled his cheek. I'm being silly, she sniffed over his shoulder. Just overtired. The nights are drawing in. Makes us all gloomy. I don't think you're being silly, Remus said as they pulled apart. And you know you have so many friends to talk to when you feel gloomy. Oh no, she smiled, cheeks blotchy. Thanks, Remus. Cup of tea? No, I ought to get home. Yaz is stuck listening to stories of Danny's glory days with the cannons otherwise. Go and rescue her then, Remus grinned. He wanted to ask how Danny was, but he didn't dare. They hadn't spoken properly in a year, another thing that would have to wait until the end of the war. Marlene said goodbye and left through the fireplace in a blaze of green flames. Remus tidied up a bit, then went to wash the ink off his hands. It had got under his fingernails and turned them black, which made him think of Livia again. He'd become extremely enthusiastic about hygiene ever since he'd got back from the werewolves. He looked out the living room window, which was fogged up with early winter chill. Street lamps were flickering on, glowing yellow in the blue twilight, except the one outside their window, which was faulty and stayed pinkish red all night. With Marlene gone, Remus was gripped with a terrible aching loneliness. He fetched his scarf and jacket and headed out the door. The garage door was open as he approached from the dark alleyway, light pouring out onto the uneven cracked pavement. As he got closer, he could hear the radio playing softly, a Stranglers song. And it sounds like an empty house standing still. Sirius was singing along under his breath, like he was concentrating hard. When Remus was finally at the threshold, he found Sirius cross-legged on the floor in front of his bike, wand behind one ear, spanner in hand. The garage was conspicuously warm for winter, but Remus couldn't see where he'd cast the heat charm, perhaps on the floor itself. Hello, he said. Sirius looked up.
Beady, come here. Come. It's okay.
Hello, what are you doing here? Marlene left, Remus shrugged. Thought I'd just pop down and see what you were up to. Same old, just tinkering, Sirius said. Oh, okay. Sit down for a bit if you like. I'm nearly finished. Sirius gestured to a stool in the corner of the garage. The garage. Only if I'm not on your way. Don't be silly. Sirius flashed him a smile and Remus sat. He watched Sirius working for a while, fascinated. Remus knew nothing about mechanics, muggle or magic, and it made him feel weirdly proud that Sirius was so clearly skilled. He liked that feeling. How are you? He asked, thinking of the conversation with Marlene. Fine. Sirius didn't look up, wand between his teeth now as he fiddled with the engine. No, I mean really, Remus pushed. Are you okay? Just in general? Don't feel like I've asked much lately. Sirius looked at him and set down his wand. I'm fine, Remus, he said. Don't worry. But I love worrying. Remus poked his tongue out. Sirius grunted with laughter and returned to his work. How are you? He asked. Good, Remus nodded before rethinking. Well, you know, as good as it can be, as good as it's possible to be right now. Do you fancy a takeaway for dinner? I don't want to cook. Yeah, okay, Remus agreed. There was a stack of boxes to his left. All of Sirius's things were packed into big mahogany trunks with scorch marks where he'd burnt the Black family crest off, but the boxes next to Remus were cardboard and held together with brown muggle tape. What are these? He asked, picking at the tape. Sirius looked up, wiping his hands on an old dishcloth. Those are the boxes from Gethin. What? Remus stood up to get a better look. Sirius bit his lip, nervous. I know you said to get rid of the stuff your mum left you, but, well, you weren't in any state to talk about it after the funeral, and I couldn't bear the thought of you regretting it. So James and I went to collect them, and I've just had them all here." "I can't believe you," Remus said, stunned. Sirius climbed to his feet hurriedly. "Moony, I'm sorry. It wasn't meant to be a secret or anything, I swear. It's just that after your mum passed away, it was one disaster after another, so it sort of slipped my mind, and you can still get rid of them if you want to. I haven't looked—" "Sirius," Remus shook his head, smiling. "I mean, I can't believe you. You're amazing. Thank you." "Oh," Sirius smiled too, scratching behind his ear bashfully. "That's good, because you had such little time with her, I thought you'd want something to remember her by. Do you want to have a look now?" Remus thought about it, shook his head. "Not just yet. Maybe on a rainy day." He helped Sirius collect everything up, and they walked back to the flat, stopping at the pie shop on the way. Sirius liked chicken and mushroom. Remus preferred steak and onion. He carried the paper bag to be gallant. "Sirius, seriously," he said as they climbed the stairs to the flat. "Thank you so much for the boxes. I'd have forgotten all about them." "It's okay," Sirius shrugged. "I know if I had anything of Reg's—" He stopped abruptly. Remus didn't know what to say, so he kept quiet as Sirius unlocked the door and entered the flat, switching the lights on and complaining, "Bloody hell, Moony, it's freezing in here." "Sorry." He tended to run hot even in winter and didn't turn the heating on if he was the only one in the flat. He felt very stupid now, remembering that Marlene had kept her gloves on the whole time she'd been there, and it hadn't even occurred to him to ask why. Sirius lit a fire, and Remus went to get plates for their dinner. They sat on the couch, leaning shoulder to shoulder and listening to the new album by the Police, which Andromeda had sent for Sirius's birthday. When they finished eating, Sirius rested his head on Remus's shoulder and closed his eyes, settling in. Remus set the plates to the kitchen and raised his arm for Sirius to fit under. Where, warm, well-fed and relaxed, he could have fallen asleep just like that. "How's Miles?" Sirius murmured after a while. "Yeah, fine. A bit down." "Down?" "She's just having a hard time with the war." Remus felt butterflies in his stomach but continued bravely. "I think we all are, aren't we?" Sirius was quiet for a bit, and Remus couldn't see his face, only the top of his head, but he knew what he was thinking. Finally he whispered, "Yeah, we are." Friday, 21st of December, 1979. It wasn't exactly a breakthrough. They still didn't talk about the war any more than they really needed to, but it felt good all the same. And while it felt cathartic to admit that they were both struggling, there was nothing that could be done to improve things. People were still dying. The Death Eaters were still gaining power. Sirius and James were still superheroes. As Christmas approached, no one felt very merry. They would not be spending the day at the Potters this year. In early December, both of James's parents were admitted to St. Mungo's. They'd contracted dragonpox, which was so contagious it meant that just visiting them was a mission in and of itself. When Sirius heard the diagnosis, he'd locked himself in the bathroom for 2 hours. Remus did a bit of research and found out why. Elderly people rarely survive the disease, so that became another thing they didn't talk about. James practically lived at the hospital when he wasn't meeting with Moody or on an assignment somewhere. Lily told Remus he had to pick up a lot of Fleamont's work and that he was up until the small hours of every night working in his father's study. "I wish I could help him," she said mournfully. "He's not ready to lose them yet. It's too cruel." Remus agreed. In what sort of a world could people like Voldemort and Greyback live while Mr. and Mrs. Potter died? Remus didn't realize how dark things had become until late December, when he got an unexpected phone call. Sirius was out. He and James had been sent to West Cork to follow up on some reports of a black magic ritual taking place. Remus had been alone all day, trying to distract himself as each minute crawled by with no news. Sirius had left him his compact mirror in case anything happened, and Remus had just spent the last hour staring at it. When the phone rang, he practically jumped out of his skin, then leapt to answer it. "Hello?" Logically, he knew it couldn't be bad news. Wizards never used phones if they could help it, but his voice shook all the same. "Hello!" A voice boomed. It was so cheerful it couldn't possibly be anyone Remus knew. Must be a wrong number. Hello? Remus frowned. I'm sorry, I think you have the... Remus, Grant sang down the phone. He sounded drunk and there was a lot of noise behind him. Come down to the Sawyer's Arms. Where's that? Bloomsbury, come on, we're all celebrating. Celebrating what? With who? My mates. Remus felt a sinking feeling. Okay, give me an hour. Whee! Grant hung up abruptly. Remus got up to change his clothes. He didn't want to know. He didn't want to go. Not where there were muggles. Not where there were people. But Grant was definitely drunk, and the last time Remus had seen him drunk, he needed help. He sounded perky enough on the phone, but Remus wanted to be sure. Besides, he needed a distraction. He couldn't sit about in the flat all evening. He shoved the mirror in his jeans pocket, pulled on a jumper, then his coat and scarf, and headed out into the wintry London streets. He got the tube to Holborn. The streets were too busy with Christmas revellers to apparate safely, and he wanted to take a convincing amount of time to arrive. The Sawyer's Arm was a proper old man's pub. Thick red and yellow carpet, etched glass windows, grimy brass fixtures. It was foggy inside with cigarette smoke, but Remus managed to track Grant down without much bother. He was sitting in a large corner booth, surrounded by a group of young people who looked about their age. Ah, Remus realized. They were students. Remus! Grant cheered, raising both arms in greeting as Remus entered the pub. You came! Sorry I'm late, Remus said shyly. The people sitting at Grant's table all looked friendly enough, but they were still strangers. Lads, Grant slurred loudly, addressing the group of men and women. This is Remus, my very oldest friend. He went to a posh private school and everything. Dead clever. Remus waved awkwardly at everyone, then turned to Grant. I see you've been celebrating. Too bloody right. Here, I got you a pint. He pushed a glass across the table and slid it a bit fast, the table slick with spilled beer. Remus darted forward to grab the drink before it flew off the edge. Thanks. He raised it slightly, then drank. Been a while since he'd been in a pub. The lager went down very smoothly. We're celebrating! Grant beamed at him. End of exams, isn't it? Oh, congratulations. Remus smiled, pulling up a stool and perched on the end of the table. What do you all study? They went round introducing themselves. Remus was never going to remember everyone's name. Susie was doing accountancy. She was a small, mousy girl with huge round glasses and a pimple on the end of her nose. Rajesh wanted to study engineering at King's, but he needed to get a better maths result first. Tim, a tall, blokey man in a rugby shirt, was doing social studies. Martine was Tim's girlfriend, studying for her nursing qualification. They were all pretty tipsy, but Grant was the drunkest of all. Remus introduced himself as best he could. He told them he was studying ancient languages because he was actually very good at runes and rarely got the opportunity to show off about it. He needn't have worried about Grant. These few friends were a world away from the sort he'd been mixing with a few years ago. The drinks kept coming, too. Remus tried to be polite and turn down each round, but it was no good. Everyone was in a Christmas mood. 3 beers in, so was Remus. The pub music alternated between Slade, Wizard, Cliff Richards, and Shakin' Stevens. There was tinsel hanging from the sconces on the walls, and even the barmen were wearing party hats. Remus had half forgotten about the season. There was no time for this stuff anymore. At about 8:30 he heard a voice in his pocket and hurried into the gents to check the mirror. It was Sirius. All's well, he said, looking very ruffled, black smudges streaking his face. Both ended up covered in ash, though. Don't ask. Going to wash off at Prongs and have something to eat. Be a while yet. As long as you're okay, Remus said earnestly. Yeah, we're fine. Sirius nodded gravely. Then he frowned, peering up at Remus through the bathroom. Where are you? At home? Pub, Remus said guiltily. With Mary? No, with Grant. He's celebrating end of exams. Oh, celebrating. Sirius's face turned stony. I got invited out, that's all, Remus said. I was going mad in the flat by myself. Okay, Mooney. Sirius gave him an odd look. Have fun. I can come to Prongs' if you want, Remus started, but Sirius's face had gone. Remus left the loos and ordered a round for everyone. He didn't have any money, so he cast a glamour on a scrap of paper he found in his pocket, and the barman thought it was a £20 note. He even gave Remus change. If Sirius was allowed to stay at James's and have a nice dinner and take his sweet time getting home, then Remus didn't see why he shouldn't be allowed to go get steaming drunk in the pub with a bunch of muggles. They stayed for a few hours talking about TV and music and clothes and films and other gloriously mundane muggle things. Eventually, one by one, the others said their goodbyes and left. Susie was the last to get up. She whispered to Remus, "You make sure he gets home okay?" nodding at Grant, who'd fallen under the table looking for his bus pass and was now sitting on the floor giggling to himself. "Yeah, no worries," Remus nodded, feeling a bit giggly himself. "Merry Christmas, Remus. It was lovely to meet you," she smiled, pulling on her coat. "Yeah, you too." Once she'd left, Remus knocked back the dregs of his pint and decided that would be it. "Aye," he gave a gentle kick under the table. "Come on, you. Time to go." "Nah, let's stay out." "How many have you had?" Remus asked, hands on his hips. He was feeling pretty tipsy, and Remus's tolerance was higher than most. "A few," Grant said, pulling himself up, shaking the whole table. Remus got a hand under his elbow to steady him and began to guide him toward the doors. "Where are you living these days?" "You know where," Grant hiccuped. "Brighton." "Brighton?" "Yes, fine. Just sit me on the last train." "No," Remus said. "You get arrested or something. Come on, you can kip on my couch." "Aw," Grant grinned. They staggered onto the tube together, and at Leicester Square the escalator was switched off, so they had to climb it, and were breathless by the time they reached the ground level. "I need a fag," Remus gasped, patting his pockets for his cigarette case. His fingers brushed against the compact mirror instead, and he felt a quiet twinge of dread as he wondered whether Sirius was home. Not that anything untoward was going on, he just didn't want to start the fight that was brewing just yet. Giving up on the cigarette, he steered Grant toward Chinatown. The streets were still quite busy, light and laughter spilling out from the Soho bars and sleazy picture houses. "What would you think of Tim?" Grant slurred, leaning heavily against Remus. "Reckon I'm in with a chance." "I thought he was seeing Martine." "He's, very tall?" "He's strong," Grant said decisively. "Like me a strong bloke. So I know you and me never work out." "Aye," Remus took umbrage. "I'm stronger than I look." Grant scoffed at him, laughing, and Remus was drunk enough to take on this challenge to his manhood. He didn't go in for displays of masculine bravado, but maybe the beer was having some influence. Acting quickly and barely thinking, he bent and grabbed Grant round the legs, lifting him up and hauling him over his shoulder. Grant was yelping and spluttering with laughter as Remus jogged with him a good few yards. "Put me down!" he shrieked. "You prove your point, you're very strong." "That's all I needed to hear," Remus smirked, stopping to set Grant down very carefully. Still unsteady on his feet, Grant grasped Remus's shoulder for support, choking laughter and grinning madly. "Oh, what's this, then?" A nasty, sneering voice came from behind them. Grant stiffened and his back straightened. He stared forward and lowered his head, making to ignore the danger brewing, but Remus was a bit pissed and couldn't help looking back. 3 men were approaching. Their faces were cast in shadow by the unreliable streetlights and tall buildings, but their body language could not be misread. They rounded shoulders, the balled-up fists, and wide gait. Masculine bravado. "Ignore 'em," Grant breathed, his lips barely moving. "Come on, quick." But Remus had never been very good at running away from a threat. "Can I help you?" The men sniggered meanly, still advancing. One spoke to another, as if Grant and Remus were deaf, or just not worth addressing at all. "Looks like a couple of fancy boys to me. Couple of dirty queers looking for trouble." If they're looking for trouble, another said, I know where they can get it. He slammed his fist into his open hand as if to demonstrate. Remus, Grant hissed, tugging on his coat. Come on. Remus ignored him. He faced the three men and raised his chin. Using his very politest private school voice, he said, Move along, gentlemen, before I do something you'll regret. The men crowed with laughter and did not move. Remus was glad. His lips curled. He shifted position, legs apart, and stared them down. With a slight turn of his wrist, they froze to the spot. It took them a second to realize what had happened. Their gormless faces now visible in the red light of a neon sign. Sex. A neon sex sign flashing in the shop window next to them. They stared at each other, tried to move their legs, but they were fixed in place, as if they'd stepped into quick-setting concrete. What the fuck? One of them grunted angrily. Don't be scared, boys, Remus grinned, rather enjoying himself. I don't bite. Often. I'm gonna fucking batter you, you poof, one of the men yelled. I'm gonna beat the piss out of you. This gave Remus an excellent idea. He snapped his fingers quickly and watched the men's faces. One by one, a look of horror crossed each of them, and Remus caught the scent moments before their jeans began to visibly darken. Poor loves, Remus chuckled. Even Grant stopped tugging his sleeve then and stared in disbelief. Have you pissed yourselves? The three humiliated men started shouting insults then, each one worse than the last, but it didn't matter. Remus and Grant were both practically hysterical. Come on, Remus said, slinging an arm round Grant's shoulder. Let's go. He did not release them until they were 2 streets away, locked inside the flat. It was hugely risky doing magic on a busy street in central London in front of muggles, but Remus couldn't work himself up to feel guilty about it. He was jubilant. It didn't seem like Grant understood what had happened. He was pretty drunk, and mostly just relieved to be safe, so Remus thought he got away with it. Back in the flat, he cracked out the whiskey to toast to his own success. This was met with roaring approval from Grant. Sirius wasn't back yet, and Remus decided not to care about that either. Most likely he decided to stay at the Potters for the night. Remus dug out some blankets and pillows to make up a bed on the couch for Grant, and then they settled in for another few hours of drinking and smoking and laughing. Time began to warp, stretching and contracting the more intoxicated Remus grew. It must have been 2 a.m. when they hit the bottom of the bottle. Remus ran his finger round the bottom of his glass tumbler, then sucked it. Ugh, Grant whined from the sofa. Gotta give up the booze. New Year's resolution. Ha, Remus barked, slouching down in his armchair, rolling a cigarette. Remus? Grant asked dopily, his head lolling over the arm of the couch, blonde curls tumbling back from his upside-down face. Yeah? Remus slurred in response. Can I ask you something? Yeah. Have you got a plan? A plan? Remus frowned, confused and blurry. For what you're gonna do with your life, you know? Oh, Remus scratched his head, arms slow and heavy. I dunno. You? Dunno, Grant sighed. Been thinking. Maybe I just want to find a girl or something. Get married. Get married? Remus choked. Christ, you're pissed. Might not be awful, Grant defended himself. Don't mind spending time with girls. They can be fun. Yeah, but, you know, if you got married, you'd be expected to... Remus gestured delicately. Grant snorted. She might not want to do it much. Anyway, might not hate it. Never given it a try, have I? Remus put his fag between his teeth thoughtfully. I did. Once. Oh, yeah? Grant sat up, interested. And? It's okay, he shrugged, lighting up. Not much to say about it, really. Mostly just embarrassing. We're still friends and stuff, though. Can't be that bad, then. Grant sighed, leaning back once more. He looked sad, and Remus wished he knew how to cheer him up. Grant reached his hand toward Remus, who sighed and handed him the newly lit cigarette. He began to roll another. Grant sighed, rolling his head back and blowing plumes of smoke at the ceiling. "They always just let me down, that's all. Men." "Not always," Remus said, not liking the melancholy turn things were taking. "No," Grant replied wistfully, glancing up, meeting Remus's eye. "No, suppose you never did." Remus felt a flutter of warm pleasure at that, though maybe it was because he was just so drunk. Grant was still staring at him intensely and smiling a bit now. Something passed between them, a very small something. But something. The door opened and Sirius entered, bringing the winter chill in with him. He stopped in his tracks when he saw Grant, who scrambled to sit upright. "Hello," Sirius said, eyes darting back and forth cautiously. Remus never had guests over, let alone muggles. "Hi, mate." Grant stood up quickly, extending a hand across the coffee table, the empty whiskey bottle on top. Sirius shook it politely. "Grant's been celebrating the end of his exams," Remus explained, feeling guilty but not sure why. "Oh, congratulations," Sirius nodded, his expression guarded. "Cheers," Grant grinned. "Have a drink." "Oh, bugger, we've had it all." "It's fine." Sirius folded his arms across his chest and raised an eyebrow, putting on his bored aristocrat routine. "I'm going to bed." He didn't give Remus so much as a second glance, just walked through the living room, down the hall to the bedroom. "Have I got you in trouble?" Grant whispered. Remus shook his head. "He's tired. I better—" "Oh, yeah, course. Listen, I'm knackered anyway. Thanks again for letting me stay." "Any time," Remus smiled, meaning it. "Thanks for inviting me out. Really, I needed it." He patted Grant's shoulder as he left. Sirius was undressing. He ignored Remus, who closed the door quietly behind himself and sat on the edge of the bed. "How did the mission go?" he asked gently. "Is James—" "A muggle in the flat, Remus," Sirius snapped. "Did you even think about the danger?" What danger?" Remus frowned, confused. "There's a war on. This place is supposed to be a safe house. It's supposed to be locked down tighter than Gringotts." "Funny," Remus said flatly. "I thought it was supposed to be our home." Sirius didn't respond, just glowered, trying to string on his pajama bottoms. Remus rubbed the back of his neck, sighing. "Look, he lives in Brighton. I couldn't just have abandoned him at a train station. He was plastered," Remus tried to explain. "So the solution was to get even more plastered," Sirius shot back. "Sonoro quaesis," Remus said, casting a silencing charm on the bedroom, the first time they'd needed it since Hogwarts. "If you want to fight," he said, stretching his arms out invitingly, "let's go. I'm more than happy to oblige." "I don't want to fight, I want to sleep," Sirius said. "Okay, fine," Remus shrugged. He pulled off his jumper, t-shirt coming with it, and began changing for bed too. Sirius got in under the duvet and watched him, still scowling. He definitely did want to fight. "Can't believe you just went out and got pissed." "It's Christmas," Remus muttered. "Sorry if I wanted a tiny bit of joy out of the season." "You couldn't wait, could you? The second I left the house, you had to—" "You're always leaving. Am I supposed to sit around worrying myself sick all night? I still exist when you're not here, you know. I need to talk to people sometimes." "Ah," Sirius scoffed. "You wanted someone—"
That's Sirius voice.
I know it's... "You want someone to pour your heart out to all of a sudden? That's rich." "Go fuck yourself," Remus yelled at the top of his voice. "Go and fuck your muggle. That's obviously what he's here for." Sirius shot back. Remus reeled as if he'd been struck. He stared at Sirius and saw the hurt in his eyes. Was that all? Was this all just boring run-of-the-mill jealousy? Remus forced himself to relax, to lower his shoulders and unclench his jaw. He closed his eyes, breathing in. Grant's on the couch because he's my friend and I didn't want any harm to come to him, he said very steadily. And I'm in here with you because there's nobody else I'd rather be in a room with, even if you are being a massive tosser. Sirius's lips pursed, then relaxed. He looked very much like he wanted to keep arguing, but had nothing left to say. In the end, he just slumped back in the bed, arms folded, and said to the ceiling, You're a massive tosser. Sirius laughed, finished changing, and climbed into bed, crawling towards Sirius. I'm your massive tosser. He reached up for the edge of the duvet and pulled it down, peeling it back from Sirius's body. Sirius allowed it, watching Remus, who started to untangle the knot of string on Sirius's pajama bottoms. He pulled those down next and licked his lips. Let me make it up to you? Sirius bit his lip, nodded, then arched his back, and they didn't speak again for hours. In the morning, Grant had gone.
It's literally the same chapters all the ways when it's Sirius and Remus. Jesus.
Mom wants me to put my hand on them. Things are good, they have a fight, then they have sex, and it's all better again.
Hashtag free Sirius. That's right. Sirius doesn't deserve this. And what the heck does Remus expect? You just leave to go to a bar with your ex and not even tell him. You know, it's not even like he, hit up Sirius. Hey, so I'm gonna go do this, okay?
Hold on.
You know what I mean?
I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I said, how messed up is it that Remus just left to go to a bar with his ex? Didn't even tell Sirius he was going.
Yeah.
At the very least.
Yeah. Sirius has every right to be upset about this, especially when, Remus said, I need somebody to talk to sometimes.
Oh, that got me. Oh, yeah, Sirius doesn't know that for the month you disappeared with the werewolves.
Now, because he's a POS. Now, he disappeared for a month. Now Sirius finds him in his apartment with him and his ex, drunk AF.
Right?
This close to each other.
And Remus was having warm, fuzzy feelings.
Yeah.
Who knows what would have happened if
Sirius
is
did
right. Spend the night.
Who knows what would have happened if he hadn't come home when he did.
Exactly. Oh, man. Sirius needs to get out. Things were good. The wedding and everything, those are great chapters.
Yeah.
Go in as soon as Remus and Sirius are alone.
It's toxic and it's bad. And yeah, they were having a legit, romantic moment.
Mm-hmm.
Just And I feel bad for Grant because Grant is in love with Remus. And Remus just can't not let him go. Just let Grant go.
No, I still want Grant in the story. That's okay. Keep Grant around.
That chapter makes me want to drink, but I gotta drive before I can drink.
The warning should have been, might turn you into an alcoholic.
Yeah, I want to drink right now. Oh my god. Sirius, is getting more and more, he's standing up to him, but then every time, as soon as he gets mad, Remus is let me play with your pee-pee and it'll all be better. Every time.
The one piece of solace I find in this is I think Grant would have done the right thing and stopped Remus if anything happened. I don't think he would have let it go that far. He knows better.
Yeah, Grant's had his heart broken so many times.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Grant's a good guy. He would have stopped it. He wouldn't have let that happen to Sirius.
I hope so. I hope so.
I think he would. I believe in Grant. I don't think Remus would do much to stop it, but
Probably not. And then he would say something like,
blamed it on Sirius.
yeah, he would have.
You were gone for like an hour. What else was I supposed to do?
Yeah, pretty much. Maybe Grant would have been too drunk. Yeah, he might have.
Maybe.
He was pretty drunk. But I don't know how that's the beginning of alcoholism. Maybe he's just going to keep drinking more and more. I don't know. But ugh. Like, I thought the stuff with Marlene was well written. How she's, like, cracking under how awful the war is and all of that.
Yeah.
I thought that stuff was good. And then it's immediately the Remus and Sirius toxic shit show. Here, let Remus make bad decisions, bad assumptions. Sirius gets mad at him for it. And then Remus turns it all around and, like, uses sex on Sirius to make it all better. Every single time!
On a positive note, go Grant.
Right, Grant passed his exams. Life is going good for him.
Good for him. Well, he just finished exams. I don't know if he knows if he passed yet.
Maddie is like, Grant is too good for Remus. Sirius is too good for Remus. It seems that everyone is too good for this cheating piece of garbage.
Honestly, at this point, even Greyback seems too good for Remus. He's an intellectual.
It's true. Greyback has read the classics.
It's true. Although Remus has read, like, everything, so... No.
Yes, but at least when Greyback has sex with more than one person, it's established that's just how things work. He's not cheating on anyone. It's just, that's how things are in the pack.
That's true.
When Remus is doing it, or at least flirting with everybody, whatever, he's emotionally cheating on Sirius is really what he's doing. That's not condoned.
No.
Like, I think that's the author is trying to be like, well, Remus is sad and lonesome because Sirius is gone all the time, and he's gone all the time, and Remus feels useless and blah, 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 and I'm just like...
Well, do something.
Fucking do something! Buy a puzzle! I don't know! Fucking do something!
Buy a puzzle.
Like, God... Why don't you start helping Marlene at St. Muggo's? Like, volunteer somewhere. Do something. If the order doesn't have anything for you to do, like,
right, use some of that wolf magic to fix everyone's ailments.
That's what I mean.
Use the bad powers for good.
Read bitches' minds to see what they're doing. Like, I don't know.
Or go out and be a goddamn superhero. Because he's like fucking Batman with a flick of his wrist. He makes them piss themselves.
Yeah, like... Oh, God, that was so dumb. Maddie says, my ex-husband is a truck driver. He would be gone for days. It's never an excuse to cheat. That's exactly it.
Right.
There is no excuse to cheat. And he is emotionally cheating with Grant right now.
Oh, 100%. I still don't think Grant would have done it.
I just feel so bad for Sirius. And I'm like, God, this relationship just keeps getting worse and worse. I hope they break up, and then Sirius goes to Azkaban, like, right after. Because, fuck Remus, that's why.
Remus probably won't care. He'll just be there, oh, I wish Sirius was here, I'm just so lonely.
Better go talk to Grant.
Yeah.
Oh my God, how messed up would it be if Sirius goes to Azkaban and then Remus and Grant get together?
I'll lose respect for Grant. Don't do that.
Grant.
He's one of the few characters I like in this. Don't do it.
Yeah, I like Grant a lot. I really do. He doesn't need to be with that piece of shit. Maddie is like, this is where it's going. I'm like, oh my god, something passed between them. Sirius is gonna go to jail, and him and Grant are gonna get together. That's what's gonna happen. It's gonna be awful.
I think I've asked this before, but do you think Azkaban allows conjugal visits?
No. Unless the Dementors are really, really hungry, and then maybe they let it happen, and then as soon as it's over, they just go on all that happiness.
It's really weird. There's so many ways I could put that, but all of them are disgusting, so I'm just going to move on.
He's like, he'll sleep with Grant and werewolves too.
Maybe at the same time.
I don't think Grant would be down for that.
He doesn't have to know he's a werewolf.
No, I don't think Grant would be down for Remus to be sleeping with multiple people.
Oh, yeah, no. You know, the worst part about the whole thing, if he does get with Grant, is the fact that we just had...
Dan Williams just said, voyeur Dementors. Why not?
Yeah,
they can't see. It's not like they can actually see what's happening.
That's true.
They just suck the happiness out of the room.
Lana does make a good point. I mean, Remus is going to think that Sirius killed them. So I guess...
I don't care anymore.
I can kind of see... Well, no, now that we know. But if he didn't do it, I mean... In a normal situation, I can see why he moved on.
Yes.
The man I loved killed my best friends.
Right.
No.
Yeah, no.
Man, how you doing? You don't have any murderous tendencies, do you? I forgot what I was going to say now. Oh, no. The really bad part about that whole situation is we just had Grant talking about how he's given up on men and everything, and they're all shit. Remus, if he does get with him, obviously at some point leaves him or just fucks it up somehow. And poor Grant is going to have to be a part of that.
Yeah. What if...
That's my biggest issue with it.
What if... Okay, Sirius goes to jail. What if Sirius goes to jail? Remus gets with Grant. And he's like, this part of my life is behind me, blah, blah, blah. And Grant is like, do you promise you're never going to hurt me? And all this stuff. And then Sirius, like, gets out of jail and goes and finds him. And Remus is like, okay, Grant, we're done. Sirius is back. It's over. Like, Jesus Christ! Grant will never date another man as long as he lives.
No. This is how he gets a wife.
Like,
Vane, if you go to our channel and then the About section, it's right there. Be right under the details.
He was supposed to think Sirius was innocent. Poor Sirius. Ugh.
Right?
Oh my god. This is what's gonna happen. I'm sure this is what's gonna happen. Like, ugh.
Also, was it this chapter we talked about James's parents and stuff?
Dragonpox, yeah.
Okay. I thought maybe I missed it in the other one, because I know some people were talking about their age and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're like 70 when they die.
Yeah, they're old.
Yeah. Saying like they had James late.
Yeah, they did. They had James late, which was part of why they spoiled him so much.
Which is true, but I wonder how late it is, considering that witches and wizards tend to live a lot longer.
Yeah.
So even though they technically had him at 50, I think it's more like a muggle having a kid at like 30, 35.
Yeah, I would
it's
agree
like
with that.
Late, but not like ridiculously late, like having it at 50.
I would agree with that. That's probably fine. Remus. God damn.
I know.
This never gets any better. Ever.
Maybe it will next chapter. What chapter was that? 160.
That was 167.
Nice.
So the next chapter is 168.
21 more chapters.
Yes. 21 more chapters and then we're done. The War, Spring and Summer, 1980. So we might get like the Lily being pregnant thing, maybe.
Summer 1980, no. Harry was born in 81, right?
No. She's gonna have Harry. She's gonna be pregnant.
Oh, he was born in 80?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought he was born in 81.
Because his parents are killed in 81.
Oh, that's right. That's where I was getting that number. I was a year off.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so...
Because Harry is a year old.
We're going to get to see baby Harry.
Maybe. Or at least birth of baby Harry.
Mm-hmm.
That's something to look forward to, I guess.
I wonder if birthing children in the wizarding world is any easier. Like, can the doctor, like, you need a C-section, can they just apparate the baby out instead of doing the surgical stuff?
Maybe.
Just boop.
I don't know.
And your kid's in the crib.
Could be. Maybe. And baby Ron should be around.
Yeah, and baby Ron. I wonder if Harry and Ron are going to, like, meet his babies.
That would be
possible.
Cool. It is possible.
They never knew it.
I'd like to hold out for just a stroll by Granger Dentistry.
Right? That would be great.
Yeah, I don't...
Stroll by Granger Dentistry and closed due to...
maternity leave or whatever. Leave. That'd be great. Too late now, though. Hermione would be like 7-8 months old at this point.
Was she? Oh, yeah, she's older.
Yeah, she's born in September.
Late maternity leave. I don't know. Parental leave. I don't know.
Either way.
Family vacation.
I feel like their relationship is just getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
They're fighting a lot more.
At this point, it's just going to be a relief when Sirius goes to Azkaban.
Yeah. It really is.
But it is what it is.
It is what it is. We just got to get through this story, guys, and we only have 21 chapters left.
And if you haven't voted
we are almost there.
And if you haven't voted on what audiobook you want us to do next, you can go to the poll and do that right now. See if anything has changed. Because Pride and Prejudice was winning by a very large margin.
That said video removed.
Yeah, that's the...
Oh, is that the same?
Yeah, that's from back then. It stays for 30 days, or 90 days.
Got you.
Oh, Pride and Prejudice went down 31%. Grimm's Fairy Tales 27%.
Frankenstein at 18.
Oh, things are moving. I'll post that one more time in the chat for you guys, just in case anyone else wants to put in their input. But
there it is again.
We're going to end that poll tonight or tomorrow morning, I guess. And we'll start working on
whatever book you guys...
Right now, that looks like Pride and Prejudice, which she's, I'm sure, happy about.
I'm super excited to read Pride and Prejudice.
I've never read it, so it'll be interesting. It'll be Harry Potter all over again. Book you love, reading it, and my reactions for the first time.
Yes, it will.
I guess it's kind of appropriate to choose a book down that road.
Since it's how the channel all started. Dan says, we know that Remus is going to go crazy and blame himself for everything. And you know what? Maybe that's where the alcoholism comes in.
Yeah.
Yay.
Smile, at least cheer up, optimistic.
We only have
chapter.
We only have Whoa.
Are you looking to see when Sirius dies?
No.
Or not Sirius dies. Sirius goes to Azkaban.
Oh my god, this keeps doing the thing. No.
What are you looking for?
We only have 6 more chapters until the war is over.
Ooh,
Or
okay.
7 more, I guess, technically, because we have to read the next one. But 7 more chapters, and then the war is over.
All right, which means Harry Potter will be an orphan.
Yes.
All right, can't wait.
Woohoo!
On that note,
We will see you guys again soon. Look out for some postings on the Discord and things. We'll let you know about the poll and all that stuff. And we will not be streaming again until the week after this.
so until then, everyone take care.
Have a good night, day, all that stuff, and
Stay
we will
safe.
see you soon.